What's going on, everybody? Just a quick programming note of some mistakes that was made that I want to make sure they are clear. During this episode, you will hear me talk about the store in question that I went to on May 22nd. I accidentally said Wilshire Boulevard, when indeed I meant to say that it was my store that was on Sherman Way. I said the college was CSU. It is CSUN. This is what happens when you make an episode when you're hyped. Other thing I did say is when I talked about West Hollywood, I said that the manager that they needed to contact would have been Jack. I did correct that in the episode, but I wanted to be clear that it was Tim that was the manager that was overseeing that spot. And I also wanted to make this perfectly clear because I had some friends of mine ask me this question about Jack. Is he the kind of person that would just see something and let it go? Jack indeed is not that kind of person. So if Jack would have seen me that day and I did not go into the store, he would have approached me, knocked on my window, or waited to confront me. He is the kind of person that will confront you right there on the spot and not wait. Okay, these are the things I wanted to clarify. So as you hear the episode, those mistakes are corrected. Enjoy the episode. And remember, when you are in the right, always fight the power. Enjoy, and I'll catch you the next episode.
Welcome to True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People, the podcast where we bring two passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction, and reminding you that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. Here is your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the episode of True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People. Of course, I'm your man, David McClam. If you guys haven't already, make sure you follow us on all of our social media. One link to a link tree will get you every place you need to go pertaining to the show. And as I always like to remind you, if you are someone or you know someone who feel like you want to hurt yourself or others, please leave this episode and dial 988. They can be reached by text or call. This is the suicide prevention hotline. They will get you the help that you need. And in case no one else has told you this today, let me be the first to tell you, I do care and I do need you to be here. There is nothing worth your life. Also, if you enjoy what we do here, there's ways that you can help out the show. Crowdweave is a fun way in which to do that, which I can give something back to you for giving to the show. And also, you can simply do buy me a coffee for just $1. The links will be in the description for both of those. All right. So before I jump into the topic of today, let me make a couple of disclaimers. This is dealing with my now former job with Apple. I have alluded to this for a couple of months. I had to wait till some litigation stuff passed before I'm able to speak out on it. And now this is the day. The reason I choose to share this with you guys is because, as you know, my platform is all about uplifting people and sharing stories that can help someone else. Well, this is another one of those. If you follow me for any period of time, you know I've put my whole story out there, from domestic abuse to being abused as a child, you name it, it's out there. This story, though, I think is important because corporations like these, whose human resources department only backs up the millionaires because it's all about money, you need to be able to protect yourself. In this episode, you will not know if the names I'm using is real or not. The only people that's going to know if the names are real or have been changed is those people that I am speaking about. If they so choose to out themselves, so be it for them. However, if you are in the know work for the company, then you know. I'm not using any last names, real or fake, just so that people don't try to go and find these people. However, when it comes to people like Mike Finger, Tim Cook, these are names, and Tara, these are names that should be in the public because they are connected to Apple in big ways, and their names have been published many, many and thousands of times. So let's get started. First, I will tell you is this is all based on my story. Everything I'm telling you, I can back up, and I will back up here on this episode. Also, just to give everybody a clear definition of what defamation of character is, since someone's told me, well, they can try to show you for defamation. Defamation can only be filed as a lawsuit if I say things that is untrue about the company or anybody in here. Nothing I'm going to tell you is untrue. And when it comes to Apple and their lawsuits, well, that's all been highly publicized too. So I'm safe with that. This is my story. I have the right to tell it, and we're going to. I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible, but there are a lot of things that you need to know that ends up on May 22nd. So I have to give you a little bit of a back history before we get into the nitty gritty. And then you will find out everything which was done, what I have done, and what I'm going to continue to do. And I will speak directly at the end of this episode to the manager who did this to me. So let's begin. The first thing I want to tell you is it hasn't all been bad. So if you guys know, I've worked for Apple for 8 years. When I started this job, it was not bad at all. Just to give you a little bit of a backstory, how I came to work for Apple. Getting into Apple is like trying to get through a forest field because they are very particular about who they hire. They have a whole team that vet people. That's all they do. I guess back in the day when I started, I was told, don't know if it's true or not, but that if they couldn't crack you in 2 weeks, then you automatically pass their background. They go through everything from everything you tell them all the way down. They're so nosy that they even try to get into classified documents that nobody should be able to if you've been in the military. So let's say you were a SEAL or you've secretly was on a team that went and killed some leader in a foreign country. They want to know all that. Of course, in the military, they're not going to get it. But I have been told on good authority that these things do happen. In my own vetting, because there was a gap in between my employment, they came back on me. And that was a time when I was a very successful YouTube influencer. My channel still exists today from that. My job had ended at the airport, and that's what I went and did full time. I had to give them all of that and records and the whole nine. So it's very hard to get into Apple. Back in 2016, I was working for Google at the time. I was in my second tenure of that because the first year prior to that, I worked for Google, but they were finally doing things with Chromebook out in stores, Best Buy. For the first time they put them out there, they had these fancy booths they made in the whole nine. They wanted people to be educated on Chromebooks and the things that people said they couldn't do, they could. So they hired a bunch of people. Now, it was kind of odd I got this job because my wife was looking at this job for me. And I was hesitant because back in the time that I started with Google, we were in the middle of a recession. And the amount of money they were offering to pay people, I'm like, ain't nobody offering this kind of money in the recession. Plus, they flew us all the way out to Florida. They put us in one of the top hotels, being the Fontainebleau. I mean, Lil Wayne had his birthday party the week I was there. And I'm like, yeah. So after my wife bugged me, I finally applied and I got hired there. I was there for about 2 years before the program came to an end. I was one of the most decorated people they had there at Google for that, because they were sending me on missions like to the college, to do the whole college thing. And they were only picking what they considered the best people to do that. So I ran to some colleges here in California and promoted Google for that. Ended up back at Palmdale Best Buy, where I live. Met a young man named Nelson. Nelson and I hit it off very well. And I then told him about my dream of working for Apple one day. At that point, because Nelson was able to witness my work pattern, what I did, how I was doing it, how I interacted with the customers, my sales strategies, all the things I was doing for Google, he felt that I was worthy enough to look into working for Apple. So when he heard of opportunities, he would let me know that. Shortly after that, they came up with this program. I guess it was a temporary one. I called it the Shadow ASC program. That's all you did. Apple hired you to actually give aid to the ASC. Now, the ASC which stands for Account Solution Consultants, is the person that you do see if you go into a Best Buy wearing an all black Apple shirt. That would be what Nelson's job was. My job was to shadow him and to give him aid. Now, because I had worked at this store many moons ago as a Best Buy blue shirt, I did know some management there. There was things that was afforded to me that I guess no one else got. I got to work there by myself at some points. Nelson had to leave. I was still there. I was running the show. Jack actually necked me, who was the manager. And when I had did the interview originally for this, I guess it came back to me that he felt like he was interviewing an ASC, but he had no room in his team, which is common for Apple. The number one complaint about working for Apple, if you look it up, is that there is no growth and there is no opportunity to really get hired because teams are small. This is true. So basically that was all through Black Friday that year. It was going to come to an end in January. So when it was time to go, Jackie pretty much said, my time with that position was over, that he had nothing on his team available, but he wanted me to stay in contact with him. So I did that. So all through 2017, I'd stayed in contact with Jack, stayed in contact with Nelson. Nelson was telling me opportunities that was coming up. So there was one that did come up. I can't remember if it was for the ASC's position or what it was, but I had got contacted and pretty much said, hey, if you're still interested in working for Apple, you can interview here with Jack. You'll probably have the pick of the litter. But if you know anything about your boy, I am loyal to a fault. So at this time, I was a general manager for Dyson. I was working with Dyson through Market Source, which is a 3PL. If you know anything about 3PL labor, it's like a middleman. So there's a company that the other companies say Dyson comes into and says that they want to hire people to go and do this job, but they don't want the stress of payroll and they don't want to do the hiring and the firing and all of that. So they leave it to this company who's the middleman. Now, you never get fully paid what you should be from here. So let's just say that they tell the company, or the company says to them $30 an hour. Okay, that was the post, but you may only get $25 an hour. And then the 3PL is getting the rest of that. So that's why I call it an unfair marketing practice. And I try to stay away from those companies. But nonetheless, I was working for them through Market Source. And that's all because before I was promoted to this position, I worked for HP through Market Source as well. I was a top salesman there. I had did some turning around of stores, so on and so forth, which led me to this. So at the time that I was notified about this new position, I had to tell Nelson, sorry, bro, can't do it because I have this very bright team of young people. And even though I discussed it with them, and I said, hey, I may be leaving. My opportunity for Apple has come up. They each told me, hey, if you got to go, you got to go. We don't want you to leave, but we appreciate that. But I am loyal to a fault. And I saw the way Dyson was going with this because they was actually using Market Source just to learn how to do things in the market. I don't want to leave these impressionable young people up to some other manager may not care about them as much as I did, especially being that I had a girl on my team named Taya, who at the time was 17, I believe, but she was one of the brightest 17-year-old minds that I've ever seen. She had a knack for business. She was able to put things together for me that no one else could do. And I went to Dyson's brass and I said, I want her as my assistant manager. They refused to give me Tay as my assistant manager because they wanted to cite age. Now, it has since come back that not only was it age, but people felt like it was racial discrimination because she was African-American and because she was a woman. Now, I've never verified those things. Would not be hard pressed for me to believe at the things I read about Dyson going down the line in the years, but don't know if that was the case. All I know is they wouldn't give me her, and I was upset about that. They gave me some dude that was 40 years old that was highly not even as qualified as Teo was, and they swore that he had all these degrees, right? So I didn't want to move at that point. So I said, I can't do it. I said, these young people depend on me. And I mean, it was her, this guy named Jacobs, this girl named Candy. Some of these young people coming in just had their first job and I wanted to mentor them. So I said, I have to pass. Now, it was told to me that at that time, don't know when another opportunity was going to come with work for Apple, in which I said, okay, I have to take my chances. Things started happening at Dyson, which the writing became on the wall that pretty soon we all was going to be out of a job. So as we got towards the end of that year, in that 2015 cycle, things started to happen with Dyson that put the writing on the wall for me. Now, I'm not saying I'm some prophet. I don't claim to be. But my wife would tell you, I'm about to tell you is true. When I come and tell you that something's going to happen, 9 out of 10, the things that I tell you is going to happen, and they do take place. I told my wife this way before we got married, now over 23 years ago, and she looked at me like I was crazy. I also said that there is the left eye versus right eye situation. I said, if my left eye is ever jumping and I tell you that it's jumping, something is going to make me mad. And this is just not going to be, I'm just upset. This is going to be monumental mad. Something real bad is going to happen that's going to really set me off. If my right eye is jumping, that means something's going to happen that's going to be very good and it's going to be exciting. She thought I was full of it until she actually saw this in practice several times now since we've been married. I don't know if it's the thing that God's giving me to alert me that things is going to happen, but very seldom, it's never really happened that if my left eye's jumping, something don't happen that's bad, and that if I tell you something's going to happen, it don't happen. I came to my wife and I said, I'm going to be out of a job at Dyson pretty soon because there's things that's happening. I went to my manager, Fernando. I said, we need to start looking for something else because something's going on with Dyson. And what set me on to that was because after they did the walkthrough with some of the Dyson brass, something didn't click right. It was like they was honing in on certain people they wouldn't. They were using certain phrases that was like future phrases, but it was cutting out certain aspects and certain things, right? So like I was in the middle of the Galleria, Glendale Galleria, and they were starting to say things like the building and if they was going to make it permanent and they didn't know what. So I'm like, something ain't right. What further set me off to that was because that year for Christmas, we supposed to get a shipment. They sent over $1 million worth of product that I never received. And the day that it didn't come, I went to my boss, Fernando, said, man, this shipment ain't here. I went and looked everywhere. No one's put in our storage lockers. If they were supposed to, we got to track this down. So Fernando and I went to track down this $1 million shipment. We called Dyson. Dyson really didn't seem to be alarmed. This is $1 million. They didn't seem to be alarmed. And this is right at the time where their hairdryer was coming out. So and I'm selling these things by the droves, right? So we're like, this is going to be a monumental Christmas. Didn't find the shipment. Finally, after we track it, Sears gets it. They say they sent it to someone over here, and this other person, they sent it over here. We never got it back. So Dyson just said, well, it's just a loss. And I'm like, $1 million and you guys don't care. Dismal numbers that year because we had nothing to sell. All we had was regular inventory. We sold out of all of that. And so I looked at Fernando and I said, I'm telling you, and I told my wife the same thing. I said, somewhere in December, either before or after Christmas, we're going to be told that we no longer have a job. In the first year, we're going to be done. And I kid you not, I think somewhere on December 26th, 27th, we all get an alert from Fernando saying we all need to jump on a call. And when we did, Fernando told us that as of January 1st, we no longer had a job. I had told people this. So then when the opportunity came up again in 2016, I get another message from Nelson. Hey, there's a new program that's coming out that Apple's going to be doing now, and it's going to be a part-time specialist program. Get your application in. This is the last time I do believe we're going to be hiring for Apple for a long time. I said, oh, cool. This all just happened. No job at Dyson. Boom, I applied. He sent it in to Jack. Jack gets hold of me. Now, remember, I have this relationship at this point with Jack, because I've interviewed him before. He liked me in my first interview, worked for him throughout, I guess it was end of 2015-ish into 2016 at this point for that program with following the ASC. And so I get an interview from Jack. This should have been my first red flag that there was going to be some problems somewhere down the line when it came to Jack because of how my interview went. Now, I'm going to point this out about Jack. If you ask him any of this, he's not going to remember it because he has problems, I guess, remembering anything. He doesn't even remember that my career started at Canoga Park when I have photos. And I believe the girl that was there at the time, name was Amanda, who's no longer there anymore, wasn't there after the first year or so. And the things that we even talked about, doesn't remember any of that. But what I'm telling you here is very accurate, and it's the truth. I remember this stuff like it was yesterday. So on my interview with Jack, I have him on speakerphone because I was trying to concentrate on that and here and the whole nine. And I never do anything without there being some type of a witness where I'm at. It is illegal to record somebody in the state of California without letting the other party know it is a two-party state. So that's why if you ever call a business down here in California and they're recording, they tell you up front, this call is being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, hang up now. Well, I couldn't come out and tell Jack, I'm going to record this, because when somebody knows that you're recording them, they change their whole demeanor of what they're going to say. So my next best bet is my wife was sitting here and I put my phone on speaker so she could hear everything that was going on. In this interview, being that Jack knew who I was, I guess he was kind of alarmed that I was out of a job. And he asked me, why was I not working? So I told him the reason why I was not working, that basically I just told you guys what happened with Dyson. They pretty much use market source to learn how to sell things on the market in stores. They'd never done it before. And then when they felt like that was no longer the case, they laid all of us off in January. Then on top of that, I was going back into market source. I was supposed to come back to the HP program, and there was a lot of balls that was dropped there on the HP end. And so that never came to fruition. Let me tell you what this man told me. He said, well, from what I described to him, it sounds like that I was down on myself and that woe is me and I didn't know what was going on. And I just feel like that I'm just sorry for myself and that I'm the reason why I'm not working. So it would be unfair for him to make a decision because based on that, he is now biased. And that he needed to pass me on to somebody else. And I guess my response to him was, what part of what I told you made you feel like that I was woe is me and down on myself? And I'm saying, oh God, why me? I never said any of that. You asked me why I was not working. I basically just told you. You didn't never hear me come, oh my gosh, Jack, man, I don't know why they picked me. God, why me? I'm always picked on, Jack. So they just decided to let me go. Did you hear any of that? No, because David's never been down on himself a day in his life. I just move on with life. You asked me a question, you got the answer. But because he's now biased, and I was pissed, I'm not going to lie to you. I was pissed off. I called somebody that I knew that worked for the company other than people that I named. This person knew Jack. And I said, what the hell gall does he have to come off and say things to me of this nature when I did nothing or said nothing, gave no inclination? The response I got back kind of resonated with me, and it sticks with me to this day. The person said, Jack's been rich for a long time. He doesn't know what the price of eggs is. So when rich people who doesn't go through anything in life, they've been on their high horse, they got millions in the bank, they got these kids that seems to be the Ivy League and they're the most well-mannered and the little trophy wife at the crib who's got their own career. They said to me, this is where Jack is. So just by you merely telling him why you're unemployed doesn't resonate with him because he hasn't been unemployed in many, 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 many years. And he set himself up to where that will never happen to him until he determines to retire. So I think about that and I'm like, that reminded me of a Dr. Phil episode that I saw a while ago where it's been a long time, but his wife, I guess, challenged him to go to the store and buy just some regular household things. This dude didn't even know what joy was because he's been rich for so long and he has other people do the shopping and it doesn't matter what it costs because he's got the money to cover it. He just shows out the checks. I will never be the person that will ever be disconnected from where I came from, but I digress. Some people's like that. So he passes me on to do an interview with a guy along with the company named Alex. I'm in this interview with Alex for about 10 minutes. Now, most of the interview with him was kind of funny, right? Because it started out with sitting where you are without looking. How many Apple devices can you name that's in your house? I started laughing. I was like, are you serious? Is that a real question? And he's like, yeah. I'm trying to see what your familiarity is. So I start naming up all these devices. My whole house is and still is, and it will cost me thousands of dollars to undo it now, was Apple. So I'm naming from Apple TVs and Macs and MacBooks and all kinds of stuff. He's like, wow, you got a lot of stuff. So 10 minutes into my interview with Alex, he's like, I don't even know why we here. You are totally a bright mind. You are totally right for this position. Congratulations. Welcome back to Apple. Now, the caveat with this was whatever Alex said, this is what Jack was going to run with. So if Alex said, no, he ain't a fit, then Jack wasn't going to give me the job. But if Alex came back and said, yeah, perfect, go with it, then Jack gave me the job. Well, that's what happened. Now, again, like I said, that should have been a red flag. But I just blew it off, right? I got the job, man. I'm back at work. Let's go do what we do. Now, as I'm working for Jack, this first year, it went pretty okay, except for the fact that he didn't do his job. I never saw Jack but 3 times in 4.5 years that I worked up under him. Now, I'll say 4.5 because of the fact that the pandemic hit right before I went into my 5th year. And then there were changes that was made that I'll briefly tell you about here in a minute. I saw Jack 3 times. According to the business handbook and the model, managers are supposed to see all of their team at least once every quarter. I'm going to repeat myself. In 4.5 years, I saw Jack 3 times. You need to keep that in mind because that's going to come back throughout the story. So I make it through that. I'm one of the most decorated specialists he has. I'm still the only specialist to this day that I believe that hit all 4 sales metrics at one time. That was all in the positive numbers. No one else is going to ever repeat that because that position is no longer there. He combined meetings at some point to where he had the specialists and the ASCs and LASCs, which was 1 and 2 steps above us in these meetings. Worst mistake in the world because now you're setting off the ASCs. First of all, we're all paid differently. We're not all paid the same. And 2 of these positions, ASCs and LASCs, they get commission and we don't. We're considered part-time. But you put us all together and what happens? Now the ASCs is seeing that the specialist is pretty much kicking their butts. My numbers were killing ASCs at some points up in here. And I am working less than they are. They're working a full 40-hour week. I'm working a 32-hour week. Okay, so when it starts coming down, now Jack wants to harass people. Oh, these specialists is killing y'all. And how are they doing this when they're only working, like half of what you guys is working? And I think this is kind of the model as we get into it that Apple was looking at going with, basic being on the basis of what they changed, right? They were seeing that these part-time specialists was able to achieve the same numbers or greater numbers than these people that they're paying these big salaries to, and they're getting 40 hours a week. So my career started out pretty good, except for that. Now pandemic hits, all have to be laid off. We're all sitting at home for 18 months. Apple did take care of all of us very well. Before then, I had told Jack, I said, if I don't get full time before my 5th year, I got to look for something else. Arguments that this was creating in my house was astronomical. My wife felt like I was way underpaid, which I was, and we'll discuss that later, that I was not paid for the work in which I was doing. If you leave it to my wife and some other people I know, they'll tell you they think I'm the best salesman they've ever met, that I could do anything in the world, and that I can sell ice to an Eskimo. Many years of being in sales and knowing the business model and knowing the way I want my business model to run, I think goes into that. But I've always told her, I'm like, you say that because we're married. And I have friends, no, it's true. You could do this. Okay. To them, I appreciate that. But I just want fair compensation for what I do. Well, that never happened. So I told Jack, I'm like, dude, I'm just not one of these 18, 19-year-old kids out here. I have a family. I'm a grown man. I got responsibilities, bills, mortgages. So, and I've tarried with this position now going on 5 years. The 5th year would be hit during the pandemic, unfortunately, right? So he was like, okay, well, let's see what happens. Well, then the pandemic was coming down and Jack says, well, can you just give us a year after this? Because now the pandemic, nobody's hiring, everything's shut down. And I went to my wife and said, that is true. Everything's kind of shut down right now. So they can't move or do anything because at this point, this new business model called community specialists, I think was already in the works and they was ready to get going with this until the pandemic hit, right? And so 18 months, Apple sends us all home. They pay us all while we're sitting at home. They eventually find us something to do online. Now we all return. So this is where things starts getting interesting. We return. We're back in the store. I think I'm back in the store like a month. And then that's when Jack says, hey, new pilot coming out for part-timers. If you guys want to do this, it's going to be called Community Specialist. Now, just got to give you guys some idea of that too. And where I'm at in Southern LA, we never get these opportunities, right? So I'm here in Palmdale, Burbank, Santa Clarita, Woodland Hills, kind of like these areas. They usually go out to like Long Beach and beyond. Those places is where all of these territories is, Long Beach, Duarte, all out there in California is where these opportunities usually go. There's been so many pilots that's come up in my 8 years that I've applied for that I've never gotten. And then I was finally just told by somebody when they say, hey, dude, we're never going to get these pilots because of where we are. So they're discriminating by employees by geographical situations. And they're like, this is just how it is. Well, Tim, who was the manager of of one of the markets here in the West, don't quote me now because numbers have been changed, but I believe we was 503. Tim was 504. From what I understand, Tim decided that he needed to take a leave of absence. Tim takes a leave of absence, has Jack take over his team. Now that we are considered a super team, everybody on the team has to be considered for this position. Jack's handing out these positions like Oprah handing out cards. So he's like, anybody want to be a community specialist? You're part-time. If you want to do it, just say you want to do it right now and you're in. Well, I had already went to Jack before when I heard about this originally. And from what I understand, he had talked to the person over it to put in to say, whatever you do, you need to interview this guy. So I'm telling you guys all of this to show you not only where I was in the company, but to show you at one point, me and Jack did have a good relationship and that I actually was doing my job because the manager has to sign off and say that he thinks that this person is a good fit to be a candidate for whatever pilot that it is. There's prerequisites that you have to have in Apple if you want to move into either a pilot or a promotion or whatever. The other reason I'm telling you this is to show you that I had no disciplinary actions in 8 years, because one of those prerequisites is you had to be with the company for at least a year. You could have no disciplinary actions on your file and that your regional manager had to be notified and had to sign off on this. So I went to the community specialist pilot. Guys, I did this pilot going on 3 years. So until they finally ended, it was 2.5 years. You finally got the notice that they were going to move with this another few months. So like I said, basically going on 3 years. Just to show you the kind of miles that I drove, because you have a bunch of people in Cupertino who does not know, I guess, the geographical location of where Palmdale is to Long Beach, okay, or Pacoima is to Long Beach. I was getting paid huge mileage checks, right? Because the fact that Long Beach is about a 2-hour stretch for me, 2.5 hours, depending on traffic. It shouldn't take me that long, but because there's always traffic going to and from, is always a 2-hour trip. This is before I even get to store number one. Territories would be changed several times throughout this whole entire thing, but I bought a new car right as we did this. It had one owner and had 24,000 miles on it. At the end of my tenure with Apple, my speedometer read 116,000 miles. That's how many miles I put on the car. The car wasn't really going anywhere, but from home to work, that was it. So we all get these positions. And I'm in this pilot for 2.5 years. Now, one thing I want to backtrack and say, because I think this is also important, is because people felt like Jack was discriminating against me from the very beginning because of the store that he chose to put me in after I was finally told I was going to be doing this full time, being the part-time specialist. What I didn't tell you is part-time specialist, when I was hired, was supposed to be a temporary thing as well. They was going to run that to the end of that year or to the end of the Christmas season. Then they would determine who was going to stay. I was one of the ones that was going to stay. He gave me the store in Pacoima, Best Buy. This store was not even doing 10% of what Apple businesses should have been doing. Now, people say, well, maybe he put you there because you was black. Maybe he put you there because he didn't like you. I didn't look at it that way. I'm not one of the ones that firstly jumps on racial discrimination. I looked at it as an opportunity. I've been here before. Maybe this was truly the only store that Jack had to put me in. This was indeed the store that I was already in, right? During this whole entire Christmas season and temporary phase. So to me, it would make only good sense to put me into this store. Now, later on, you hear me say that Jack says, I have no relationships, and because they weren't built the way he thinks they should have been built. But for a man that has no relationships, let's take this store I'm telling you about, Pacoima. Not even doing 10% of Apple's business. Lowest store on the totem pole. Nobody even has them on their radar, right? If you look at the numbers between Pacoima's Best Buy and the 4 nearest Best Buys nearest to it, they're dead last, right? Nobody's thinking about Pacoima. So I get this store. I walk in. My first official day now that I'm going to be here. This is going to be my post. This is where I'm coming all the time. Finally, I go and I meet the general manager and I say, hey, I'm David. I'm your Apple rep. I'm here to work for you. What can we do? The general manager looked at me and he said, I want Pacoima to perform. I want this store to be turned around. I want to be in that top echelon. And I said, I got you. I said, I'll give you what you need if you give me what I need, and we'll take this store to the next level. Give me 6 months. It took me less than 6 months. We flipped this store completely upside down. Their number went from being the lowest to one of the highest, to the point to where the LASCs, who was the people 2 steps above me, right? The people that Jack used for his henchmen. My bosses throughout this time was a guy named Jesse and Kyle. I don't never look at Jack as my boss because I never seen him. I told you 3 times I ever seen him. And those 3 times had to do when I first started, when he came because he wanted to create havoc throughout the Black Friday week because he didn't think that their lines were the way he wanted them to be. And then the 3rd time when he came with his boss. Never seen Jack after that. My reviews and everything was dictated and written by 2 people, either Kyle or Jesse. I was with Jesse for my first 2.5 years, and then Kyle came for the rest of the tenure when I was a specialist. These was the guys. And so I believe it was Jesse was coming in, was like, hey, we checked these numbers 3, 4 times. We couldn't believe these numbers, but they're all true. Congratulations. I mean, when you're sitting at number 1, number 5, number 4 in certain categories, when you were dead last, people take notice. So then when the HomePod came out, there was these little booths. They was going to put the HomePods in. They're supposed to showcase them and help you get more sales. But Pacoima was not even on that list at one point. They should have never been on the list because of the fact that these booths was only going to be given, or these standees is only going to be given to stores that had great revenue. Well, guess whose name had to go on that list? Yes, Pacoima got one, and one was still sitting there unless they recently took it out after this whole thing was over. So I had took this store and flipped it upside down. So again, doing my job. When the pandemic hit in 2020, when I went back in 18 months later, everybody expected their store to take a significant hit. There really was no sales, right? Best Buy was still operating, but it was operating from a carryout model, which you would have to order online and they would bring you your order. This is why they have so many things in your local Best Buys now that all started with the pandemic. They just kept that going. So I'm like, dude, what do I got to do to get my store back up? I wasn't really seeing a lot of numbers throughout the time I was home for 18 months. I expected the store to be a complete wreck. Nobody was cleaning it, nothing like that. People, what I walked into, you can only get if you have good relationships with the people that runs that store. I have a great relationship with the GM, the assistant manager, the manager over mobile, all of the workers. I walk in, store clean. There was a couple things that I had to put back the way it's supposed to be. Store good. I'm still in the top 5 for Apple Care. This is after 18 months of nobody seeing me. Store clean. Still top 5 for Apple Care. And when I went to the GM and said, dude, this is one of the cleanest stores I've seen since the pandemic. What was going on? He said, man, we wanted to make sure we showed up for you. You've done so much for this store. And we know that you was off because Apple put you guys out. So we wanted to make sure we showed up for you. You can only get that if you have a good relationship. So fast forward, I'm in the middle of this pilot. And for the first year or so of this pilot, Tim's gone. Now, he's the main regional manager over 504, which a lot of this pilot is within his territory. Gone. They had this where they was going to take an LASC. They had to all interview like they was going for a manager position because they was going to be the manager over this particular program, at least for each chunk of it. What I mean by that is you had us in California that was doing it. You got people in Wisconsin, right, all throughout. So you had to have a manager of each of those. Well, a manager was appointed to us. His name was Jose. Now, I mentioned Jose because Jose doesn't get the credit in which he deserves. I just told you this was a very brand new program. Nobody seemed to know what the heck was going on. They just put us all in these places and said, here's this big map of all these territories. This is the chunk you're going to have. Disperse your people. At the time, if I remember right, there's only like 4 or 5 of us that was doing this. And then there was Jose. Jose was our manager. Jose set out to have us be the best in the West. Here's the thing, though, with Jose. Jose was all about trying to make life as easy as possible when you had to do a job. He was one of the brightest minds because he knew how to make shortcuts through series shortcuts to do certain things. He was creating things for us that we can use. Hey, okay, we're going to go into Costco. Here's a whole sheet on everything Costco has. Just use this shortcut and all the things you need is here. A lot of this program that they now have fully in place, Jose came up with some of the concepts too. Now, they'll never tell you that. They're not going to give him the credit, but I'm going to tell you that. And they can shoot me, don't care. Jose is the reason why the community specialist program ran as well as it did in its pilot. And they took a lot of Jose's concepts and ran with those now that we're in the actual job title. Jose was the manager that came up with shared scheduling or shared calendars. So what we would do is we would get all these stores and we would divide however many stores we had between, at that time, we did have 3 full days to go in, right? It was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we would divide all those stores up where we was going to go. Jose was the one that came up and said, hey, so I don't got to bug everybody and I have an idea where everybody's going. Why don't we do a shared calendar? And we did. And he said, pick a color, but make sure you pick a different color because we all showed up differently in his calendar. So Jose could just glance at this calendar, know where I was going to be, know where another person is going to be, know where this person is going to be. So, hey, David, I got you. You're going to be here at this Costco at 10 o'clock. Is that still going to be the plan? Yes, sir. See you in 10 minutes. Okay. This is how this worked. A lot of the concepts, the shortcuts that we use, the business templates. He was the one that actually built these sheets for us on Black Friday. They're called velocity sheets. He had all the products listed on this sheet that we had to sell with boxes. So all we had to do was take a sheet. Okay, ma'am, you want a MacBook? Okay, with that MacBook, you want a case? Oh, you want to get this? All this on this sheet. I'm just check marking stuff. And I'm like, okay, here you go. Give this to the register at the front. Jose was a lot of the mind behind what we have. So we have Jose. Best manager, as I'm going to tell you, he's the best manager for this in the business. All of his team got along with him. We all respected him. He didn't have to ask us to do things twice, but we also didn't have to ask him to do things twice. If we came to him and said, I really have a problem with this, Jose was the one that wanted to go out and make sure that that was fixed. And he was giving all of this feedback to the company. And the first year, that's all we really did, right? There was a point in time every Sunday, we had to sit down and document everything that happened throughout the week with this program so that they could put this in their database so they know how they was going to run with this. So for the first year and a half of this program, things went swimmingly when we had Jose at the helm. Well, then within this time, Tim comes back. Tim decides, I guess, he can come back to his job post and do his job again. So he does. And things kind of go all to hell from there. He doesn't know about the program. He's doing things that we're told that we could not do. Like you're not supposed to go into an AT&T and talk Apple Care or try to force it on people. But Tim goes in one of my AT&Ts and does exactly that. Tells me that everything is being used in his excuse. Okay, I was in the middle of a very Jewish part of town. I was right across the street. This particular AT&T was right across the street from the Quentin Tarantino theater. If you walk either direction from that theater, you run into nothing but Jewish synagogues out there. Oh, and there's some Amish people too. So a lot of them didn't buy into all this technology and didn't want to buy extra things. To Tim, that was nonsensical. I got into it with Tim a couple times. because I had to go cover a story one time at West Hollywood. You will find out in this company, there's people that I call golden people. These are people that can do no wrong, regardless of what they do. It's all your fault. You know, when I'm sent into somebody's store as a guest and we find that it's all in shambles and then there's complaints coming directly from the people, what you going to do? So one day me and Tim had to have this come to Jesus meeting. He threatened to fire me. Now this is important because this is why it leads into Jack and what he did. So he had threatened to fire me a couple of times because of the fact that his boy at West Hollywood didn't do what he was supposed to do. There was still a broken post that was there from a year prior. I know that because I went to help with this store that year prior. And I was like, how is this my fault? I'm just a guest in the store. You guys are giving me no playbook to go by. Well, then one day I was sick. I was sicker than 18 dogs. And I texted Tim and I said, hey, I'm not coming to work today. I'm sick. Now, my mistake was because I was so sick that day, I didn't get out of bed to put in my sick time. We have to do all that manually. So forgot about it until paycheck time came. And Tim reached out and said, hey, it's time for paycheck time. You got to submit your paycheck today, but I see that you're still missing this day. Were you at work? What happened? Now, I said I was working that day because I did not remember it. And I said, yeah, I believe I was at work that day. So he says, give me the list of stores you went to that day. Now, every day there was a list of stores that I went to every week on the same day. So gave him, here's a list of stores I would have been at that day. As I was looking over things and thinking about it, and then looking at my tracking software, because I have software that constantly tracks me. That also comes into play here. And when I get to this final part here in a minute, it tracks me everywhere I go. I never turn it off because of the fact that then I'll forget to turn it on. But for mileage sakes, I have that on. Now, my tracking software that I use is so sophisticated. Not only does it tell me where I went, but it tells me the exact address. It tells me the exact route, how much time it actually took me to get there. All of this is pinpointed. So when I looked at that particular day, I noticed that all it said was that my car stayed at home. And I think it made one trip down in Palmdale because my wife used my car to go out to do something, get me medicine, whatever that it was. And I was like, oh, I was homesick that day. I immediately sent Tim an email saying, hey, man, I made a mistake. I actually wasn't at work that day. I was actually sick. He came back with an attitude, right? You got to get up on top of this. Now you got to do a historical edit. And I was like, all right, I'll take that. Yes, I understand. That's my fault. My neighbor just got it, right? But then in this conversation, because he felt like there was a bunch of things I was doing wrong. And I was like, no, I'm not. I said, I rewired this whole store. He was mad because one of the iMacs was broke out the box. I had to turn that in. I'm like, that's not my fault. But he had all of these infractions, right, that I supposedly had did. From now he's adding time card fraud, and he sees that maybe I'm not as charismatic about doing this, that, and the other thing. And I pretty much looked at him and said, I admit to you, my performance may have suffered a little bit. I says, but look at the manager in which I have. When you have a manager that disregards you, or they talk down to you, or they give off racist tones. Now, I've never really accused him of being racist, even though other people has, but there were significant racist tones in his messaging to me. And being at the time, 51-year-old black man, I know what these racist tones and tropes are, and body language, and what he was using, and the words that he was using, and the messaging he was trying to get across. And I literally told him, so is this supposed to be a racist situation? Which he quickly backed off from, right? Because I said, I'm not the one to be messed with. I'm not some of the other people just going to call you out on your BS. And so finally, at the end of that, he threatened to fire me. I can fire you right now. Then he tried to scare me by saying, I've walked in and I've called HR before, and I've had people fired immediately on the spot. And I said, if you think you can do that, do so. But let Apple know on your way out the door, I'm going to be suing them. But first, what you going to fire me for? Well, I'm going to get you for time card fraud. Where's the fraud? Well, you said you was at work that day and you was at home. And I said, I immediately sent you an email which cancels any time card fraud that you have. So let me get different than time card fraud. It means I defrauded the system by punching and saying that I was at work and I really wasn't at work, but I stayed at home. And we don't try to correct that. The moment I found the mistake, I automatically sent you an email that said I made a mistake and told you where I made the mistake at, which cancels any notion of your time card fraud. There's not a judge in this country or this state That doesn't agree with me. So you just lost a lawsuit and you just lost Apple some money. He backed down from me at that point. To tell you how this historical credit works, they let the regional managers do whatever they want to do. I would have never followed one of those. I would have said, okay, look, here's the deal. What we're going to do. The 8 hours has already been paid. Now, you guys got to follow me on this. A historical time card edit is done because there was a mistake made on your time card. The time card has already been submitted, so there's no way to correct it. So that means I'm missing 8 hours of pay. So I have to go back and do a historical time card edit, which you have to call to do, right? You can't just do this online. I have to actually call somebody from what they call the people team to help me do this. But you have to go back in and say, hey, I need to do a time card edit for this day. Here's where I was. Here was the times. They put it in. And then on your next paycheck, you would see that 8 hours in which you're missing. Now, follow me with this one. If he wants me to go now do a historical time card edit, my time card has already been submitted, which means I'm already getting paid for this day in question. Now you want me to go in and do a historical time card edit on the same day for the same hours. Wouldn't that mean that you would get paid for that day all over again? Now, I took steps to make sure that didn't happen because then, of course, that would have been my fault. And I don't want to have the company come lying and saying, oh, well, we're going to fire you because you tried to fraud us for an extra 8 hours of pay, even though the boss told me to do so. So when I called into the people store, I'm like, hey, the hours has already been paid, but the wrong code was put in for that. So I want to make sure it's perfectly clear that I'm not putting in a historical edit to get paid. I've already been paid that. So they did that correctly. After that, Tim kind of left me alone, so I thought, until one day before they decided to make this particular job role permanent, I get a call. Everybody knows I'm at lunch from 2 to 3. It's on a calendar. He can read it. I get a call at 2:20. Where you at? What you doing? I'm in the middle of my lunch. What store you going to after this? Now, I can't remember the name of the store, people. My territory has changed so many times. All I can remember is that the store was 17 minutes away from where I was at. And that was because I had a Best Buy in Duarte. Since I was in that area that day, I said, I'm going to go ahead and stop at Duarte because there's a little shopping center there and they have one of my favorite fast food Chinese restaurants there and I love their rice. So I'm just going to get rice today. I got to be at the store here anyways and go up to 17 minutes away. I'll just sit here in my car in the back of Best Buy's parking lot and have lunch. That's what I did. So when Tim called me, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to this other store 17 minutes away. And then after that, I'm coming back to my store that's right behind the Best Buy in Duarte. Why the backtracking? Well, the people I needed to see at the T-Mobile in Duarte was not going to be there up until the time around the 3:15ish, 3:30ish time. And so I said, that's where I'm going to go. Okay, cool. I'll meet you over here at 3:30 at this store in Duarte. Now, I go to this other store. They never have any questions. Why this day they have 40 billion questions. We're going through the new iOS features and a whole bunch of other things that had just dropped. So I'm late getting to this store. When I walk into this store, people, Tim has this grin like a cat that just caught a mouse. And I walk in like, hey, Tim, sorry I'm late. And before I can get the rest of it out, he's like, yeah. Well, David, he tells me that he's never seen you before. Have you ever been to this store? And I said, absolutely, I've been to this store. I said, but Tim, that's not weird because I've never seen him before either. And I walk over to the guy and say, hey, my name is David, Apple rep. He introduced himself. And I said, how long have you been working here? I said, this is the first time I'm seeing you. He was just new there about a week, which means that he came on within the week that I had just came and went before. So I said, where's Jenny? Now, Jenny was the rock star of this T-Mobile. She was the Apple person there. I say person because she wasn't a champion. This store was too small to have what they call an Apple champion, but she was the resident Apple person, Apple associate there. She knew everything about Apple. She wanted to learn about Apple and the whole nine. So Jenny comes out and he hopped over to her again. Yeah. Do you know David? Has David been here? Have you seen him? And she goes, absolutely. He's been here. He comes here every week. Matter of fact, he's the one that gives me all my stuff I need to know about Apple. And he just has this look on his face like, thought I had him. So then Jenny comes, as he's talking to this other guy, Jenny comes up to me and says, hey, can you come back tomorrow? I want to talk to you. And I said, sure, Jenny, anything for you. I'll come back tomorrow. Usually when I come there, I'm there one day. That's it. I'm going to another store. I don't see them for a week. I said, I'll add you to my schedule and then I'll come back towards the end of the day. And she goes, okay, that's fine. Go back into that store. And the first thing she says is, was that guy your boss? And I said, yeah. And she says, he's trying to fire you. And she gives me the rundown of everything Tim did before I showed up. He was questioning if I really was at work because I was late by 10 minutes. He had questioned her. She says that he had even talked to her before I came in. So this whole thing of, well, have you seen David before? He already knew the answers because he had already asked her that before I had got there. In which she told you what I just told you here, that, she sees me every week and I'm the one that keeps her breast and her heart apple stuff. And she really enjoys when I come in. So Tim was really hoping to fire me on time card fraud that day. So since he couldn't get me there, he wants to walk back into the Duarte and try to pick it apart. Now, everything that they say they found wrong with the store, ironically, wasn't wrong when Tim walked to the store. I want you guys keep that in mind. That this came up too. He goes, oh, your store looks good. Everything looks put up, the whole nine. But then when he had to send somebody else out there to do an install, this wasn't done right. And I had to take 4,000 zip ties and all this. I wasn't even going to bother to show you the pictures of all the work I did, because what nobody wanted to know is I had rewired that whole shop too. Nobody had been there in eons. I had put things up, but what the store wasn't telling people that go in there is that they was taking things down. They was messing things around. I have photos right now I can produce that shows all of that. I was straightening up the whole shop. I'll go back 2 days later, the whole thing's destroyed, but they put all that on me. So long story short, now the program ends. Tim is unsuccessful in firing me, but at this time, he's relaying all of this stuff to Jack. He's getting into Jack's head about what a bad employee I am, and I'm not doing this, that, and other thing, because it takes a lot to fire somebody with my tenure at this point. It's easier to fire somebody who's worked there for 90 days versus firing somebody for 8 years. So everything changes, program changes. They tell us from corporate community specialists a thing, and they do it the way we didn't think they was going to do it. They gut 3 positions immediately, which affects all of us. They gutted the part-time specialists. They gutted the ASCs and the LASCs. Everybody now is going to be community specialists. And due to that, that means territory is going to change. Now they gave us an option. Either you stay or you go. If you decide to go, we're going to give you a severance of 6 months. From my calculations, 6 months of severance for me between $27,000 and $30,000. They're going to give us 6 months of continued health care and things of that nature. I had to make a decision. And I talked to my wife about that, and she goes, what are you going to do? And I says, I'm nervous. I says, yeah, $27,000 and $30,000. That's a lot of money. I says, but to pay up what we need to pay up and make sure that we're abreast and make sure everything's up to date, that's going to take a large chunk of that. And I'm hoping I need to be back at work hopefully by November. What if I don't find anything in November? What if I don't find anything in December and January? By this time, that severance is going to dry up. So I said, if Tim is going to be my manager, though, I'm out. Severance, I'm done. Well, then it came up that they were going to redo the territories again. And by redoing the territories, that actually put Jack into some of Tim's territory. And then they put Tim in further territory. So now I would be going back to Jack. I had no problem with this in the beginning, right? Because I had a relationship with Jack. Everything was cool, fine. So I told my wife, going back to Jack, I'll stay with the company. If I knew what I knew now, would have left. So trying to make this as short as possible, let's fast forward to what actually took place. Jack starts targeting me. Now, this is what happens when you make somebody work when they don't want to. You need to understand, up until this time, no RM really followed the rules. Now, even though I don't like this other manager named Sean because he messed with my bereavement and then didn't have the empathy or the sympathy to realize I was on bereavement and not vacation. That's a whole nother story I got time to get into. But the one thing I would credit Sean and Tim with is this. They actually did do their job. They actually went out into the field. when Tim came back, the first thing I heard about Tim from other people is Tim is always active. He's always going to be out in the field. He always makes visits. Sean, always in the field. Now, here's how you can tell. We also had certain threads that we was able to go through and that we utilize. Now, tell me why on these threads, all the other RMs, right? Sean, Tim, people that's in different states was posting things that they did or things that they saw or places that they visited with their employees, specialists, whatever they are, ASCs or things they talked about. How come Jack has none of these pictures? But everybody question when I say, hey, he ain't doing this job. Why does Jack have none of these photos? Every time I turned around, Tim and Sean's region was posting some new innovation. Jack didn't have none of these because he wasn't doing the visits he was supposed to be doing. He did the bare minimum. But when they got rid of LASCs, the mask had to come off. Then they rewrote the handbook with the following rules, which I believe that it was that RMs had to be in the field at least, 4 or 5 days a week? And they was making sure that you was in the field those 4 or 5 days a week because your manager, the senior RM, is supposed to keep track of this. So now Jack has no choice but to get off his butt, get off his couch, get in his car, and go visit people. Well, he's been talking to Tim this whole entire time. So I became his favorite target. Now, we went to training in October. We came back. We kicked this in November. Didn't really see Jack all that much in November, December. Now, why is that? It's because now we're going into that time of Black Friday. It's holiday time, which means we're not going to be in the field very much at this point. Because the fact that they're going to pull us back and say, we want you guys to just work your best buys. The carriers have certain times that we can go in throughout the year. When it comes back Friday time, we get shut down. So we're about to spend pretty much all of November, at least starting that week before Thanksgiving, clean through January in one location, or maybe two if you have two Best Buys. If I remember this correctly, Jack came out one time before we were shut down, and it was at an AT&T. And I was telling the manager, you know, hey, I know this is coming time for holiday. Be the only time I get to see you. I want to introduce myself, let you know what's going on. And then he's like, hey, man, cool. Can we get some numbers, though? Can we see where we are right now so we have a place that we can be relatable to after the holidays? Sure, I left my MacBook and stuff in my car. Let me go get it. Now, tell me why. I've been in this store 10 minutes. I walk out. The moment I walk out, apparently, Jack shows up. I get a phone call. Where you at? I'm in the parking lot at the AT&T here in Woodland Hills where I'm supposed to be. Well, why are you in the store? I had to come get my MacBook because the manager wanted some numbers. Well, I'll meet you at the door. Now, I want you to listen to the contradictory. Now, he's trying to do what his boy Tim couldn't do, right? This is the same thing Tim kind of did, right? So now he's trying to catch me not being at the store. But he says to me when I walk up to him, well, I just went in the store and they told me you just walked out. How are you trying to catch me that big at the store if you were in the store and the store just told you he was here, but he just stepped out? I believe that it was more being said than that, but that's what Jack wanted me to believe. They just said, well, he just came in and you walked out. I was like, yeah, I went to get my MacBook, which I just told the manager, which is on my shoulder, which now I got to sit here and listen to this 20-minute rant from him, which is now taking me away from my visit time. We only have a certain amount of time to visit the store, up to an hour. He's taking a good chunk of that, and I'm going to have to end up moving on to a new store now. Now, some key things that he said throughout his little spiel, though, makes me know further that he is indeed talking to Tim. He starts talking about perception, things that he's heard. He can only go by what he's been hearing, and the perception is that I'm not in the store. Where's that perception coming from when I'm standing directly in front of you and I got my MacBook on my shoulder about to go back in? Want to come in with me? He didn't want to do that. Now, I want you guys to understand, if I was committing time card fraud and if I was at home like he's trying to allude that I am, there is no way I can do that without being caught on either side, or Tim's side or his. I'm at least 45 minutes with no traffic away from any store. So if Jack shows up at the store and he sits there and he goes, well, I'm at the store, where you at? And if I say, hey, I'm in the parking lot, he expects me to pop up within the next 5 minutes. If I'm truly at home, guess what I can't do? I can't pop up in the next 5 minutes. I'm too far away. I'm already cooked. Why would I do that? But that's what he's trying to say. So after that long spiel, we kick into the holiday season. I had already started having inclination of what was going on, but I didn't really say anything to my wife at this point. I'm like, let me see how this pans out. You know, Jack's listening to Tim, which I don't even know if that's completely legal, right? Because the fact that, yeah, you're supposed to be able to talk about things, but I don't think you're supposed to be able to go to another manager. But man, this dude, I don't really like him, and this is what he's doing and all of this. I think internal manager wise, you can send an internal file, but there is nothing internal written down between me or Tim. But I digress. They were saying all of this. Keep in mind, even though not 100% illegal, but companies won't even tell anybody why you've been fired. They verify just the dates that you worked there and the dates that you left. Now, they could go into why you was fired, but the companies don't do that because they don't want a lawsuit, like we're about to talk about here. Because if they say, well, we fired him for time card fraud, that is now defamation, because I got to make you prove that I indeed did do time card fraud. And if you cost me this job, that is a lawsuit. So companies don't dive into why you was fired to avoid lawsuits, right? So all through holiday, everything went well. January shows up. Jack starts following me profusely. Now, you need to understand, never in the 8 years I worked there up until now did a manager ever just show up on a whim. We always got a phone call. We always got a message saying, hey, this is a store I see you're going to be at. You're going to be there today. I'm going to come see you. I even asked Jack years ago why they just don't do that. Because where I'm from, a lot of managers just show up unannounced, right? And he said, well, we want to be respectful of your time. What if you decided to leave that store early? We need to know. Well, that all went out the window. I was the only one on the team that I'm aware of at this point that Jack was just randomly showing up to. I ask you guys this question. If I'm committing time card fraud and not where I'm supposed to be, and I know and I feel like I'm getting targeted, wouldn't it be dumb on my end not to make sure I'm where I'm supposed to be if I know this dude's targeting me? So now that Jack can't catch me in time card fraud, he starts nitpicking at everything. We go back to the same AT&T. He starts talking about how he don't think I have good relationships because on my way out, I didn't say goodbye. Now, let me kind of clarify that. And I'm going to tell you where the first stint of racism could have come into. Now, I don't know if he was intentionally being racist, but what he says could be taken as that, especially since he decided to correct himself. So he come out and he goes, I don't think you got good relationships in this store. And I said, what makes you say that? I said, I talked to everybody there, I introduced you. Where is not the good relationships? The store was busy. So this was a particular AT&T that was always busy. No matter what time of day I went in the store, they were always busy. And not to mention that they was going through manager switches. So the first manager that was there, he left and went someplace else and they brought a new dude in, right? So the store was extremely busy that day. And he says, well, you didn't say goodbye. Now, I did catch eye contact with one of the girls that was there. And I waved, I threw my hand and waved goodbye. And I'll see you guys next week. And she waved back and I left. And he says, well, you didn't say goodbye. I says, Jack, the store is extremely busy. I did catch eye contact. I waved. I said goodbye. And he says, well, if this is one of your friends, he went to say homie, you would have walked up to him and said goodbye. And I said, no, I wouldn't have. He says, you can't name one person that will say that. I says, one's name is Nelson. So once you go ask Nelson how many times that he's been busy that I just waved or I gave a signal, or if he didn't see me, I just left and talked to him later. So then I called my other, I don't have relationships since Jack said I have none. My other two friends, Andrew and Dion. Now me and Andy and Dion, we all came up together in this game. I worked for Google. Dion was just a regular salesperson for Intel, and Andy worked for HP. Throughout the next year after I met them, Dion became the senior regional manager for Intel. Okay. So I knew a lot going on Intel because he was my friend. So I called them up. I said, how many times have I walked into a store and you guys have been busy? And I just waved at you because you was busy. Do I ever come over and interrupt you guys? And he goes, no. And he says, you guys, you never do. You just wave or you send us a text message. Couldn't convince Jack of this though. And I said to Jack, I says, for one, Jack, that's unprofessional. I said, because he's in the middle of a sale. And what if you go over the middle of the sale and you make this customer mad? What if he's in the middle of his spiel, he's got this customer hooked, and now I go over there and I interrupt his sale and now I cost him a sale? I said, that's unprofessional. He says to me, if you make a customer mad, then you did it wrong. And I was like, come again? Well, if you go over and say goodbye to somebody and the customer gets mad, then you did it wrong. I said, the only thing I would have done wrong is interrupt his sale. And now I'm to blame for him not getting the sale. This is also a Tim problem because in the AT&T I told you guys about, we're not supposed to go over and quote anything. He over here quoting free phones and everything else, and he hadn't even looked at a product sheet to see if that promo was still good. Now, let me show you the scrutiny that puts you under. If the Apple person who's wearing the Apple on his shirt and you buying his phone comes over and say, hey, man, you can get a free phone today if you buy this phone, and AT&T says, I'm sorry, that promotion isn't going on, but this customer now says, dude, I sat here now for the hour because I was buying this phone because your man back here just told me I can get a free phone. You got to do something. Well, now that makes the relationship with Apple and AT&T bad because AT&T now has to come up with this free phone that you told them you was going to get when you're not supposed to say anything. That's the danger of that. And I just brought it up because I remember that part, but that's exactly what's going on with Jack. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to cost him a sale because then that's not my fault. Then he wanted to go to another store with me. So we ended up going to my store in Encino. And I think he asked me, does this place have a parking lot? And I said, both. Because the parking lot there is so small that there's also street parking. He wanted to blow a lid on that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said it had no parking and it does have a parking lot. I said both. Well, you don't know your stores. And to prove that you know your stores, I need you to know all the numbers of all your stores. I got 14 stores, people. I'm the only one on the team that has what they call a dual anchor store. I have 2 different Best Buys and 12 other stores on top of that. So I called somebody up. I'm not going to mention who I called. And I said, do you know all the store numbers of your stores? Person said, nope. I said, Jack just told me that I need to memorize all the store numbers of the stores. The person's like, nah, I'm not doing that. For one, people, it's impossible to know all the store numbers. You know why? Because territories keep freaking changing. If you have stores 783, 205, and 481 this week, you may have 105, 210, and 29 next week. So it doesn't do us any good really to memorize those store numbers. We didn't know where the stores are. We all have the aid of GPS. We all have the aid of a schedule. So all of these things is written down in our schedule, full store name, everything. Jack can see all of that, right? The reason why he wants you to remember the store numbers is to make his job easier because the company is too lazy to give the RMs the full information. So all he sees, according to him, is just the store number. It is not my job to make his job easier. So then I go home that day in January. And I tell my wife, I said, something's going on. I said, but I'm being targeted by Jack. I said, I'm just telling you this ahead of time. I'm being targeted by Jack. You need to start preparing for that. We need to look at what's going to go on. I don't know what's happening. I says, but I'm being targeted. She was shocked. She goes, Jack of all people? I'm like, well, when your boy can't get you, you got to exact revenge. And I said, I think that's what he's doing. Tim has told him all this stuff about me. Tim couldn't get me, so now I guess it's his job to get me. I said, but there's no reason to target me. Well, then, within February, I believe it was February because this month I went on vacation, Jack shows up 2 different times. Once he comes and says that there's a complaint from Best Buy in Woodland Hills, and I'm on my phone all the time, walking around with my AirPods in, and that I was back in their consultation room for 5 hours. So he pulls me, he says, well, they're telling me that you're on your phone all the time. Are you on your phone? Nope. Do you walk in the store with your AirPods in? Yep. I'm finishing up my podcast or I'm finishing up my music, whatever I was listening to. Says, Jack, I walk in the store 10 minutes before it's time for me to go to work. I'm not even on the clock yet. as far as Best Buy is concerned. So I walk in, I put my stuff away, I lock up what I need to lock up, I take my AirPods out. By that time, it is now 10 o'clock. I'm not on my AirPods anymore. They was out before I even started. This is also coming from the same store that allows a Samsung rep to bring in his Nintendo Switch, go behind the counter, and play Nintendo Switch throughout his shift. Even to the point to where he comes out and helps a customer with Joy-Cons in his hands. But I digress. I pass it along to Jack. He go, oh, I can't control what they do. I'm just letting you know. There's nitpicking going on in this store. Well, were you in the consultation room? Yep. I went there for 5 hours. I was there for an hour. What was you doing? What you told me I'm supposed to do? My schedule. Now, my attorneys looked at this as racial discrimination on discrimination. Here's one part they use, because now Jack makes these rules only for me. Well, you need to go out to your car at 6 o'clock or 6:30 to do this. I'll allow that. And you better make sure you're in the parking lot. If I decide to drive by, I better see your car sitting out there. What does that sound like to y'all? Then he tells me, well, they have video that shows you back in the consultation room for 5 hours. I said, produce the video. You got the video? Oh, no, I don't got the video. I said, Jack, the store's right behind us. Now, if you're telling me that this just happened, they really do still have tape of this. Let's go. He didn't want to go. So you have no proof that I've done this for 5 hours, but you want to believe them over me. Now, let's talk about this schedule thing that he's making us do. It is in the handbook, which I still do have the handbook, that the regional managers is supposed to be the ones that's supposed to write your weekly schedules. He passed that on to us. Now, a lot of us, I'm sure, was happy because we know our territories, yes, better than our managers do. And from where we're coming from, it would make more sense, I guess, for us to write our own schedule. But that's not what the rule book says. Because I guess the amount of pay, they're trying to put as much on the regional managers as they possibly can. They just cost the LASCs and ASCs hundreds of thousands of dollars. They just pull vehicles from LASCs. So Jack's the only one running around here with a 6-figure salary, who should have the most to do because of the fact that, well, he's a regional manager, but he now has the benefit of one thing that we no longer have. It's called admin time. And admin time was that 1 to 2 hours a day will allot you on your shift to sit down and do all the paperwork you need to do and schedule all that. Well, he's the only one that has admin time anymore. But all the stuff to be done on the clock. So I looked at Jack and said, I'm doing what you told me to do. Well, now I gotta go to my car and do that in the middle of summertime, wintertime. He don't care when. I'm running my gas out of my car because I got to run my air conditioner on my heater. And as far as I know, again, I'm the only one he's telling to do this. A week later, Jack comes back. Now, so ironically, he has the same complaint from Sherman Oaks. They said that you're on your phone, you don't do anything. And I looked at him and says, Jack, it's very coincidental that you seem to have the same complaint from 2 separate stores. Well, this is what they're telling me. And so I finally asked him, I says, well, I've tried to tell you this before. This is exactly what I said to her. I said, since I have no relationships, according to you, did you not forget who I'm connected to? Did you not forget that my best friend is the senior manager over at Intel? And that he won't send anybody to Sherman Oaks because the manager there does not like any vendors. Jack already knew this because the guy that was in there before me has worked for Apple longer than me. They moved him to a different store and I called him. And I said, have you had problems with this dude? And he said, yep. I went around other people. Jack didn't want to listen to that neither. And I did corner him. I said, you've had this problem since old boy's been in the store. Well, how do you know I haven't said anything to him? I said, okay, you got me there. I don't know. But I did ask him point blank, the guy we're talking about. He says, yes, Jack has come on my case about it. So it's Jack thing that even if somebody hates you, even if they threaten to kick you out the store, he threatened my job that day. Well, if they kick you out of this store, you don't no longer have a job. And I said, I'll sue you and them because you have no reason to kick me out of any store. And then I said, maybe you should take it to HR. I go, oh, maybe we should go to HR. See, when people do that, that means that they know HR ain't going to do nothing. And it's true because remember this, people, this is what's told to me by somebody that works for Apple. And it's true. The HR department is not there for you as a worker. It's there to protect their assets, the millionaires, the Jacks of the world, his senior VP, the Pauls of the world, the Terras, the Mike Fingers, the Tim Cooks. That's what HR is there to protect. They don't give a squat about you. They're figuring out every way legally possible to get out of anything you put them in. And I was told by this person, I don't think it benefits you to go to HR because the fact that they're just going to take his side anywhere it goes. I've proven that later that that's exactly what happened. Even though I didn't go to HR, they came to me, right? So I go home again. In February, I tell my wife, says, I'm being targeted. So I asked Jack and says, did you go talk to anybody else? His excuse to me was, I'm not trying to find nothing. And I'm like, what do you mean not trying to find nothing? Well, what if I go to somebody else and I ask them this question and they come and tell me it's true, you didn't do this, then I'm going to have to take action. I said, then take action because I guarantee you that's not what's going to happen. Folks, I have been a general manager before. You heard me mention Dyson. First of all, that's not the only store that I've been a general manager is. I've had many other general manager positions. One, I know I'm aging myself, but way back when I lived in Indiana, there was a shop called Video Update. Video Update in Indiana, where I was at in Lafayette, which was college town, did big business. I was the general manager of one, and within 2 weeks' time became the general manager of four because they had to fire the guy that was over my store because he was stealing merchandise and all kinds of stuff from the store. And then they fired 3 other managers for theft. So they came to me and said, I'll never forget the name, and this has been many years ago, and I'll never forget the name of my regional manager. Her name was Lexi. Lexi came to me and says, congratulations, David. You went from being an MIT, which is manager in training, to a full-fledged general manager. Now you got 3 stores. And now the problem is the other 2 stores is in West Lafayette, which is the biggest grossing stores they got. Each of those stores was more than $7.5 to $10 million a piece. Lots of money coming in there. I had more than 70 different employees I had to contend with, payroll, firing, the whole nine. I'll even go out to say this. My job was a lot harder being a general manager of Video Update than Jack's job ever has been at Apple because I didn't have the luxury of sitting back on my couch some days saying I'm not going into work. So as a general manager, if somebody comes and complains and says so-and-so is doing this, guess what, people? If so-and-so really is doing that, the person that's bringing the complaint is not the only one that's got a complaint, and it's not the only one that sees it, because that means that they have to do something else to cover for the person that's not doing their job. And especially the fact that I'm from Apple and I'm making a little bit more than what they make. That's always a contingent plot in Best Buy. Best Buy didn't like Apple employees at first because they knew the amount of money that we made because they went and tried to apply for some of these same jobs. I'm the first one they're going to write out. So I'm going to go talk to people. Hey, I got this complaint. David's always on his phone. He doesn't do his job when he's here. What can you tell me? People are going to sing like a bird. Yeah, man, he ain't never here. He's always on his phone. He yakking, and there's 20 customers sitting up in here, and we're all trying to sell stuff. He's supposed to be the Apple rep, but I can never get his attention to ask him questions to sell devices because he's always on the phone. That's what you're going to get. So I went and talked to several different people, including a manager named Mike. Mike's like, we don't got no problem with you. According to Jack, though, he went and talked to Mike, and Mike didn't have the same answers. He wasn't as high on me as he said that he was, or that I said that he was. And I said, well, why don't we go back in here and talk to Mike right now? But see, here's a problem where you can tell somebody's a liar. When you tell them, let's go back and talk to the people that's bringing this news, and you're mentioning names, and that person is there that day on the floor, and you say, well, let's go talk to him. Jack never wanted to confront nobody. I said, until you bring me proof, then I guess it's my word against theirs, but I'm telling you, I didn't do anything. And since you're bringing up videotapes and all of this, where they at? Jack can never prove that. So I come home after that meeting. I tell my wife, I said, I'm telling you, I'm being targeted. I'm now a couple weeks away from vacation. This is now the second time in 2 months I've told my wife, or in a month and a half, I told my wife that I'm being targeted. I said, we're going to go on this vacation. I don't know what's going to happen. I said, but I'm telling you, I'm being targeted by Jack, and it's now become discriminatory. And the first question she asked me is it racist? I said, I don't know if it is. I said, a part of me says that it is. He's made a statement that he had to quickly recant and cover himself, that I believe that it is. I said, but I'm not going to jump to that conclusion yet. I says, but what he is doing is targeting, and he, for some reason, is discriminating against me. He's making rules up that only I'm following, and I'm telling you I'm being targeted. The other quick rule that he messed up, but HR, which here in a minute you get to know how come I got in contact with HR, but HR told me directly, oh, well, we allow the managers to do whatever they want. So Jack was already costing me money. Follow me on this. When the company made this position now permanent, they restructured how they did if you got paid on the clock and your mileage. Either way it goes, David was eating miles. So even when the pilot, I had to eat 45 miles because that was the amount of miles from my house to my old store in Pacoima. The handbook they came up with pretty much, okay, here's how your mileage is going to get paid. You only get mileage if you are in your territory. So that means I got to be within my first store, which is over 40 something miles away from my house, before I get mileage. I only get mileage within that little radius. Okay. My mileage checks dropped from over $600 to $100 and something to just barely $33 a week. They made us turn these in every week. Understand, your mileage check is supposed to take care of your car. You're not putting a tire on my car for the amount of mileage I was getting. But here's where he cost me the money. The first 45 minutes of the drive is on you. So we was going to try to fix our schedules to where we always got to the store on time. This would mean leaving early. Jack's like, nope, not doing that. The first 45 minutes on you. So you're going to leave your house at 9:15 every morning. And no matter where you are at 10 a.m., you clock in. Okay. This is within the rule book. The first 45-minute drive is on me. So according to that book, Jack did what he's supposed to do. Here's where he circumvents that. I live the furthest out from anybody. It is going to actually come into play that I'm going to be on the road longer than 45 minutes. Jack comes crying to me about he didn't want to rock the boat and he's afraid that he going to get caught up and corporate's going to come pull his card, and he has all his other colleagues is following the book, but he wasn't going to follow the book. So my question is, Jack, why are you afraid of a rule that you can prove in any court of law because they wrote it in the handbook that this is how it's supposed to go? I just don't want to take that chance. So here's where David gets swindled out of money. I have to leave between 6:15 and 6:30 every day, or where traffic predicts. What that means is I have to look at my GPS, see how long it was going to take me to get home from the store I was at, and dictate what time I would have to leave to hopefully put me home within 7 o'clock or 45 minutes of that. Here's why I lose money. Let's say I leave at 6:30. I have to stay on the clock, according to Jack, until 7. My 45 minutes did not start at the time in which I left the store, because I'm still on the clock. That means technically from 6:30 to 7:15 would have been 45 minutes. I should have been able to clock back in and collect that. But my 45 minutes technically does not begin now until 7:45. However, I'm not allowed to punch back in, because I have left enough time, according to him, where I should have gotten home before the 45-minute thing kicked in. People, there's been times I didn't walk into my door until 8:30. I lost all that money because of what the regional manager told me I had to do, because he didn't want to follow the rule of the company. Keep in mind where I live on a highway called Highway 14. People can't drive out here, dude. So there's always an accident. We've had semis blow up. We've had things that just happen. We had to totally reroute. We had a gang shooting up here. It was one of the biker gangs that shot some girl for ratting out. That shut down the freeway. So there's other things than just regular driving that affects that time. So I've calculated that I'm owed at least a couple $100 from Apple based on what their own manager did. But I brought up the human resource. Oh, we allow the manager to change the rules at any time. I bring that to you to let you know that what I'm about to tell you that happened is all Jack's decision. Vacation time comes. I'm out for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. I leave at the end of February. I come back in the middle of March. I'm not at work even a week. Get a call. Family member dies. So here's how I come back on from vacation. I go on automatic bereavement. While I'm on bereavement, top family friend member dies at the same time. So now I'm dealing with this bereavement with my family, and now this family friend passes. Now, of course, bereavement doesn't deal with friends, but I'm out on my family member that passed. We're still dealing with that. They didn't hold this family member's funeral for another month anyway, which at the time I wouldn't have to worry about it, but you'll find out why in a minute. Now, after I'm done with all of that jazz, I come back to work sometime in April. Jack continues to target me. And now at this time, I think here before, whatever, we was doing the Ignite Challenge. He came down harder on me than anybody else in this Ignite Challenge situation. Because Ignite Challenge is a challenge. You have to go get your Apple Masters, which is people that gets phones from Apple in certain stores to promote the brand. And also they have to do certain things. I have no authority on whether they do it or not. Apple tells you profusely, you cannot go in there and tell them you got to do it. You cannot threaten them. You cannot say we're going to do this other thing. You cannot do that. So basically it's just us going in there going, hey man, can we see your phone? Let me help you with these things. If they don't want to do it, we can't force them. I came in last before I went on vacation. Jack came, for what I know, just ridiculed me. You can't be last. What are you doing out here? And I'm like, so one, I was gone for the majority of the time. Two, what the heck do you want me to do? You want me to go in there with a gun, hold it to their neck and say, pull out your phone and do it right now? If I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, they don't do it. They don't do it. Did he yell at the person that was there longer than I am that came right above me? Nope. So now the second night challenge, we're going to do this time. David wasn't last. And I went back and did the same thing I did before. And said, you guys got to get this done for me. Let's get this done. But did he go yell at the person that was worked there for more than 16 years that came in dead last? Said nothing. Another part of my lawsuit. You have to treat everybody the same, because if you don't treat everybody the same, it comes back to bite you in the butt at some point. So we're back April. Jack's still targeting me. He's following me store to store. Every time I look up, there's a Jack. At this point, I'm not even surprised if he's just following me out and following me around or just sitting in the parking lot at this point, right? He's nitpicking everything I do, but he can't find anything that is concrete to go to Apple with to say they got to get rid of me. Again, I advised my wife one last time, I'm being targeted. And she says, if you get fired, what is your recourse? I said, I'm going to sue Apple for wrongful termination and discrimination at best. And she said, do you think it's going to go that far? I said, I don't put anything past anybody, especially the way Jack has been acting. Now, what Jack doesn't know is there's some people out there that's actually tracking him. So even if they won't come forward and say this because of the fact that they're afraid of their own job, there was a number of people on my team that knew Jack was targeting me because they was doing the math and figuring out if they hadn't seen Jack in X amount of weeks, but he seems to always be talking about me. Well, there's only one place he could be if he's really out, and that's seeing me. So let's jump ahead to May 22nd, the infamous day. Before I do, I want you guys to keep this in mind because we're going to talk a little bit about this. Apple is no stranger to lawsuits, especially discriminatory lawsuits or firing people based on race. 2005, a former employee accused Apple of race discrimination and size. She worked for HR. Her name was Shawnee Patterson, and she was fired by Apple after she complained that she was being paid less than her colleagues. In her suit, she had claimed that white colleagues who were juniors to her pulled higher salaries. She also alleged that she was suspended one day after she complained of racial discrimination. That was only one. They were sued back in 2001, again on the grounds of racial discrimination. The attorney for the plaintiffs dubbed it as one of the largest racial discrimination cases in U.S. history. He was a former employee that accused Apple in 2001 of a series of discriminating actions based on the man's race. He was an unnamed employee. He worked as a product design engineer, and he claimed he was fired after he brought a friend to the office as a way to encourage that friend to earn a degree. His attorney had then stated that he felt it was a strong case of discrimination and wrongful termination. His white counterparts have not been disciplined or terminated for bringing a friend or family member to campus, and this is pretextual way for them to get him out of the company. I want you guys to keep those in mind because what I'm about to tell you and the reason I believe in which I was fired. May 22nd rolled around. It was like any other day. There was a meeting that was held promptly at 10 o'clock. Jack was somewhere. I don't think he was at his house because it looked like a hotel room, whatever. Jack actually usually makes mention on the call if he's going to be out that day and who he is going to see. Now, even though there was no mention of who he was going to see, what Jack didn't know is I was already one up on him. After the call was over, I'm already at my AT&T that I needed to be at, which is the infamous one in Woodland Hills. After the call was over, my wife called. And she says, I just wanted to check in because I think something's going on with our son that day. And she goes, what are you still in your meeting? I said, no, I'm on my way into my store here in a second. And I said, I have a feeling I'm going to see Jack today. And she goes, well, did he say anything? I said, no. I said, but the way he's been targeting me and the way he's been doing things, I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's sitting in this parking lot right now and I don't see him. I says, but I have a feeling I'm going to see Jack today. So I go into my AT&T, I do my business there, to go there my allotted time. I can't remember if I did or not, but somehow I think I left that store early. I think I had alerted Jack I was leaving that store early, whatever, to go to the next store. But in any case, I left that store after I think about 35 minutes, and I went to my next store. So the next store I was supposed to go to was off of Wilshire Boulevard. It's in LA, and it's right down the street from CSU campus. Now, I don't even know why they would put a campus there because where this store is located is not in the best place in the world for a store or anything. It's very run down. It's very dilapidated. It's in a very poor area. It is also a third-party store. Now, I bring this up because managers usually don't care about a third-party store. This is, I think, the first time in 8 years. Well, I won't say 8 years. I wasn't driving for 8 years. This is the first time in the 3 years, which is including the 2 years of doing the pilot now this year, that I've ever been visited by a manager at a third-party store. They usually don't care about them because they don't bring in that much money. They can't be on the Apple partnership program or the Apple Masters program. They're treated very differently by not only their corporation, but also by ours. So I found it weird. So I go to my store in Wilshire. And this is where everything starts to hit the head. Get to the store, go up to the window. I'm looking through the window. It's very busy in there. And I'm like, I'm not going to get a chance to talk to anybody. I'm going to go back. I was feeling very lightheaded today. So I'm going to go take my 15-minute break. I will come back up in 15 minutes and then I'll see if it's died down any. Go back to my car. I lean back in my car, go on a 15-minute break. Now, understand, I'm allowed one 15-minute break a day at any time in which I deem necessary to take it. I put a video on and then I lean back and I actually close my eyes, listen to the video while I'm sitting in my car for 15 minutes. Get out of my car, go back and look 15 minutes later, store still packed, still people in there. So I said, I'm going to leave and I'll come back to this store later on. If I don't make it back today, I'll pencil it in. So I go to my car. I actually try to make a phone call to AT&T at that point because I want to see if I can get a hold of the manager back there. I actually look at my email and a couple other things work related. Then I leave. Total time at the store, about 33 minutes. Now, kids in mind, I've talked to other LASCs that done it before, and they said it is our business. So it is our practice too, that if a store is busy, we don't stay there. We move along and come back. So I want to let you guys know that this is nothing unusual that happens. I went as far as to ask, well, is your regional manager aware that you do this? Yeah. They're all aware of that because the fact that nobody cares unless the stores don't get seen. Got it. Go to my next store, which is 7 minutes up the road, is a Verizon. Why when I pull into the Verizon, Jack calls? What's up, Jack? Hey, David, how you doing? What store did you just come from? So I just came from my store on Wilshire Boulevard. Well, did you see me? No. Did you see me? Well, I was at the store. Really? Yeah, well, they tell me in the store they've never seen you there. You never come there before. And I says, Jack, what does contact say? Now, let me explain to you guys contact. Contact is a program that's on our phones from Apple that we have to use, especially not in this position when you can't use it unless you're at the store. If you do use it when you're not at the store, you can't be verified. So what happens is when you get in front of the store, you're going to say, I'm here, and you punch into the store, and then it's going to say verify. When you push that verify button through geographical location, it's going to tell if you're there at the store or not, and it's going to come back with a green check mark. If you don't get that green mark, that means you are not verified because you were not at the store. If you're not at the store, it will come up with something that says something like unverified or couldn't verify you or whatever. It'll take the punch, but it's sending the corporate, hey, we couldn't verify he was here because he was not within 100 feet of the store. If you begin to listen, Jack contradicts himself through all of this, right? So he was like, well, I can see that you clocked in from contact. Okay, so if you can see that I clocked in and I was there for 33 minutes, he told me this, why are you calling me? You know I was there because I can't fake the program. Now, here's where his downfall is. Jack didn't punch into that store. It is protocol that everybody who goes to that store, so that everybody knows who everybody is, punches in. I have the screenshots because I knew they was going to cut me out of everything immediately. Jack never punched into the store. If you look at check-in and check-outs that day, the only person that checked in and checked out of that location was me. That makes it his word against mine because he didn't even follow protocol from the company. The company can't even verify that Jack was really there. So the conversation continues. Well, I was there. You didn't see me? No, I didn't see you. Now, I want you guys to think about this park I'm about to describe to you. For one, it's a poor area. I just said that. Two, with all the Jack's money and as uppity as he is, this is the last place he wants to be caught at. Three, there's no way nobody's in that parking lot driving what he drives that I don't see. He's the one out there that's got a 2025 Volvo that's given him by the company. Your other cars out there is old. My car is also newer compared to some of the cars that's out there. And I'm in a 2020 Nissan. So there would have been no way I couldn't have seen Jack if he was there. The only way I wouldn't have seen Jack is if Jack parked down the ways, because it's in the little strip mall, from the strip mall and parked his car someplace else. We all know that's not going to happen because Jack has back problems and he cries about walking 2 feet. So that means he had to park within that vicinity. No Jack. Then he goes on to say that he talked to him, like I told you, they said I'd never been there before. He says, what's the name of the manager? I said, I don't know. And I said, the reason I don't know, Jack, is because this is the store that changes managers, I swear, every other time I'm in here. And I said, I haven't been here since I've been back on vacation, which contact tells you the last time I signed in there. I said, so I haven't been back in there since last time on vacation, which is why it was important to me to be able to talk to somebody to find out what's going on in the store. I wasn't going to get that done today with all the people in here. Okay, well, you said you was at the store. Yeah, I was at the store. Contact was there. Well, what did you do for the 33 minutes you was there? I said, well, 15 minutes of that, I took my break before I went back up there to see what was going on with the store again. And then when I was back on the clock after that, I did email, some other things that was business related. I called back to AT&T. That was it. Now, if Jack was truly there, why would this be his next line? Well, I believe you are lying to me. Whoa. You said you're at the store. You did not see me. Therefore, you say you know I was not at the store. Why are you going to say you believe I'm lying to you? If you believe I'm lying to you, that means you're not even there. Or you can come on stir and say, well, you're lying because I have proof, which again, Jack has none. Now, let me show you how dumb this situation is. If I'm a manager trying to get somebody, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to get you concrete. And if this sharpens up Jack's investigation tools, I'm sorry to anybody that works with the company that's listening, but here's how dumb he is. There's a device that the company gives all of us that has a camera attached to this called an iPhone. If that was me, I was like, oh, got him. Here he is sitting in this car, just leaning back, pimping. I'm going to take some photos. Now, in my context, what I told you, I had the right to lean back in my car. When I went back to my car, I was on my 15-minute break. Therefore, I'm not supposed to really do any work on my break. But I would at least have the photo. Okay, I was in my car. Yes, I leaned back. I was taking my break. I would have had photos of when I pulled in. I would have had photos of me just sitting in the car that you thinking I'm doing. I would have walked into the establishment and said, hey, do you guys mind if I take this a video or if I just do an auto recording and have you guys tell me what you just said? Because I need to make sure I document this since David hasn't been here. None of that. I asked him for names of people he talked to. He couldn't give me no names. So what does it say to you guys? But I digress. I said, Jack, I don't know what to tell you. I'm on my way to Verizon right now. If you want to see me, I'll be at that store. 7 minutes up the road. I'm here now. Coming up and visit me. I'm going to be here for an hour. Now, I say that I'm going to be there for an hour confidently because of what this store is. This Verizon store, I'm never out of there before an hour because these guys always have something for me. They always got questions, or they want to pick my brain about iOS. So they want to pick my brain about what we just announced. So they want to talk about how well things are working for this customer. We want to get into the customer demographic that they really think the iPhone 16e is for. I mean, this is what all goes into this store. I had a couple of stores I loved going to because they were really engaged with the Apple product and they really wanted me to come in every week because they had questions. So when I told Jack, I'm going to be here for an hour, I was there for an hour, 5 minutes. No Jack. Get back in my car to head to my next store, which is over in Sherman Oaks. I'm 5 minutes away, and he knows where I'm going because the calendar's been updated. He knows where I'm heading. But this also proves he's not looking at the calendar when he calls me and says, well, are you at the store? Where you going now? And I said, I'm heading to my next store. I'll be there in 5 minutes. And his answer was, if you're not heading home, turn around and go home, you're being suspended for a week. Call me before you decide to go back in on that Thursday, because I'll let you know what's going on. Do you have anything to say? And this is exactly what I said to him. I said, you have been listening too much to Tim, and it's going to get you in some serious problems. So I don't know what the problem is, Jack, or what made you decide you want to turn on me like this. I says, but I'm telling you, I'm not the one to be messed with on this. I know my rights. I know what I have done and what I haven't done. His reply to that was he was disappointed because he was always the manager that was in my corner. And I said, disappointed? I said, I'm extremely disappointed because the fact that you're letting something that somebody else has said to you paint this picture of me in your brain when you worked with me longer than anybody. I says, but do whatever it is you feel you got to do. I'll go on suspension May 22nd. The following week, just like I was supposed to, I'm calling in, right? Because it's time for me to go back. So that following week was May 29th. Now, by this time, people in my team either thinks that I'm out on leave again or I'm dead or whatever, because like I told you guys, for the last 5 years at least, death has followed my family. Just to give you some insight of that, it all kicked out with my oldest daughter's mom. Got a call one day from her saying, Mom died. 11 months or so later, my mom passes away in September 2020. 11 and a half months later, my father-in-law passes away in August of 2021. Then we have various deaths in between that. Then I go on vacation, come back. Family member dies there. While that family member is gone, this is all back in March 2025. Then a friend dies at that exact same week that I'm out taking care of this family member. Now, This is going to tell you how long I was on suspension. While I was on suspension, which Jack was told this, you think he cared? Nope. My 45-year-old sister-in-law drops dead on June 4th, 2025. So a lot of the people that I was close to at work knew that I had these issues going on with death in the family. So I'm like, they probably thinking somebody died again, because it seems like that everybody in my family is just dying within the last 5 years. So when it came time to go ahead and call back in on the 29th, Jack informs me that Paul is on the call. And this is getting to the reason why I believe I was fired. Paul was on the call, and he's going through the same interrogation process again. Now, you know how it is. First of all, again, people, I'm not saying I'm a lawyer. I'm not saying I'm a cop, but I do true crime for part of my career. There's a lot of studying that goes into true crime. There's a lot of law enforcement I've talked to. There's some FBI agents I've talked to that's done interrogations. I mean, if anybody's up on the law and how this stuff works, why are you going to mess with the true crime person that's on your team that has a podcast about it? Oh, but Jack's trying. He's trying to twist questions and ask the same questions in the same direction. And what did you do? And did you do this and do that? And I finally came out to him and said, Jack, I know what you're trying to do. I've told you the same story 40 million times. I just told you the same story. The story ain't going to change. So no matter how much you're trying to change these questions up on me, you got the wrong one. Just move on. So then he asked me to do something I'm sure he's asked nobody else to do. Well, you said you tried to call AT&T. Can you give me the call log on that? I said, my call log stopped the day before. I think it was the day before all this happened, or the day after, and just erases from there, because I have it where I do that so it doesn't get overwhelmed. Oh, how funny. How coincidental that this ended on that day. I said, I don't care what you believe, Jack. I really don't. And so then at the end of it, he goes, well, we're going to still leave you on suspension while we do an investigation. Now, folks, let me tell you what the investigation was. There was no investigation, because in this same thing, he asked me, well, what is the cameras going to say to me when I pull them from T-Mobile, which I had a smirk on my face and said, they're going to say exactly the same thing I just told you. Here's why I was smirking, people. There is no cameras at T-Mobile. Now, I don't know about some of the fancier T-Mobiles. I've actually talked to other people at other T-Mobiles that work there, and they said the only cameras in which we have is that there's some camera that's built into the stanchion where the phone is in case it gets stolen, something like that. That's it. You can even tell it's there. Now, unless you're in a shopping mall or something like that, they ain't packing no cameras, homie. But he tried to tell me, what's the cameras gonna say? There is no cameras. The investigation that Jack was trying to run was that either I was going to come clean and say he got me and everything he said I did it, and I'm sorry, and please don't fire me and grovel at the ring. That's one thing he thought was going to happen. Or they thought that they would just leave me on suspension so long that David would finally just get tired and just quit. David ain't no fool. So he goes, we're still going to have you on suspension. Just remember, don't go into no meetings. Don't go to no calls. Don't do, all this other stuff. Don't go into no stores, yada, 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 right? All that. Anything you want to say. And here's exactly why I got fired. Because I blew the whistle at Jack. This is one reason I got fired. The other reason is because I wouldn't kiss his behind and kiss his ring. I said, maybe since you're trying to fire me for not doing my job, which we clearly see that I was doing my job that day, then maybe you should tell your manager that you're not doing your job and you haven't done it for many years. Jack, how many times have you seen me in the last 4.5 years? And I paused. Now, he didn't say anything, but at this whole time, Paul was writing stuff, and I seen his eyes kind of look up when I said that. Jack was stuck. Let me help you with that. 3 times. 3 times in 4.5 years. Once when I started. The second time when it was Black Friday, you came and created a whole bunch of havoc that my whole team left the floor because they thought you were, for lack of a better term, an ass. And the third time is when Paul came to visit and he was coming to my store because since I'm not doing my job, everybody was so proud of my store and the numbers that Performer was doing and the way they were set up. Jack just had to bring Paul to my store that meeting. And he brought other people from Bakersfield with him. So 3 times in 4.5 years. Said, Jack, I believe the handbook states that you're supposed to see everybody on your team once every quarter. That never happened. And I said, there's other things in which you're not doing. You make us do our own scheduling. You can't do your own numbers. You can't activate you can't even operate your own freaking devices. You depend on LASCs to do that stuff for you. Jack wanted to get off the call real quick then. All right, we're going to go ahead and end this call, and we'll be back in contact with you in another week. Hung up the phone. HR came into play because I just happened to be in the middle of a movie 2 days later with my kid, and HR calls. Says that she was calling because there was a meeting between me and Jack where Paul was there, and there were some concerns that I had. So that means that Paul had to call human resources and turn them in. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall after that conversation. But somehow Paul ends up calling, I guess, HR, and that was it. Why they wasted my time? I don't know, because HR did nothing. I told them the exact same thing. I said, if you really want to dig into it, there's people that don't work for this company anymore. There's people that just quit that worked up under Jack. Won't you call them? I said, if the team is being honest, you can call anybody on the team right now. They'll tell you the same thing I'm trying to tell you. I said, but I don't think they're going to do that because everybody's afraid for their job. I says, but if you did your due diligence and your research, I think you would find out these things about Jack. Well, what would you like to see happen? I said, well, I'm suspended. Maybe you guys should suspend Jack and investigate him. I says, but in all outs, since Jack is targeting me for my job, I don't think I should lose my job. I said, I can never go back now because I blew the whistle on him, and he's going to take that as a vendetta, and the relationship will never be the same. I says, but if you guys were smart, you would find me someplace else to go. You would find me another position or whatever, because you know and I know that Jack has no grounds to fire me. I said directly to the HR representative, and she could not deny it. So this goes on and on and on, right? So not only am I still on suspension, Jack takes a 2-week vacation. I believe he went to Italy. He calls me a day before he goes. Well, I'm going on vacation, and Tim and Paul's going to be over my territory, and I don't expect anything to change while I'm gone, but you're still on suspension. Now, I want you guys to answer yourself this question. If you're trying to make up in your mind, well, did David really do anything wrong to be fired? I want you to answer yourself this question. I went on suspension May 22nd. There was no resolve in this until June the 26th. That was a month and 3 days. What employer do you know that puts a person on suspension for a month and 3 days with pay from the company? The boss goes on a full-fledged 2-week vacation to Italy while you're still sucking up the payroll when they have grounds to fire you. I'll wait. I've asked other people. I've been a general manager, like I said before. I've never taken a month to fire somebody. An investigation lasted all of a day. Because I'm coming to fire you, I already got the goods, right? I got the evidence I need. I got everything I need to go before I come up and say, hey, we going to fire you today because this, and that. And any other job, if you're going to fire somebody, you already have the documentation, the proof, and everything you need to fire someone. Again, I ask you the question, how many employers do you know put somebody on leave for 1 month if they already know they have the grounds to fire you? Now, I'm sure there's some entities that do that, military, police, FBI, that kind of stuff, because they got things they really got to dig into, right? Like, okay, can we be sued for this other thing? This ain't Apple. Everybody I've talked to has said, no, they've never heard of that before. One person said that he worked for Apple for over 17 years and never heard of anybody being on suspension. And before I finish the story, I'll tell you this. There is a guy that was the biggest notorious time card frauder on his team. Now, I'm not going to mention this person's name because this person, I think, is still with the company, just in a different state. Keep in mind, I just said still with the company, just in a different state. This person was doing this so long that he was doing this before I was even an Apple employee. I was still a Google employee when I saw the time card fraud happening from this person. We would look around. Hey, man, I got a question for the Apple rep. Where is he at? We ain't seen him in 6 hours. He would come and punch in and leave. Now, I can't verify this to be gospel, that I do believe is true. This person actually ended up getting caught. He got caught by Jack. Now, I want you to ask me, did he get fired? Was there grounds to fire him? According to the handbook, time card fraud is grounds to fire you immediately. Did this person get fired immediately? Nope. They put him on an action plan. Now, I want to keep this in mind again. I think I said at the beginning, I said it again. I worked for Apple for 8 years. I was a top decorated part-time specialist. I have never in 8 years had any disciplinary action of any kind. No write-up, no action plan, no coaching, no direct talk to, nothing. They wanted to fire me, but this cat has had other actions, the disciplinary actions against him, and he still works for the company this day. So don't tell me there's not discrimination. So finally, Jack goes on this vacation. We're like, how much longer is this going to last? I guess he thought I was going to go ahead and quit by this time. I ain't quitting, because when you quit, you admit you did something wrong, which I did nothing wrong. 2, if I have to go on unemployment, you trying to mess with my unemployment. I ain't quitting, even though unemployment says you can get unemployment now if you quit. It's harder because that means you voluntarily took yourself off a job and now you want to sit home and get unemployment. I wasn't quitting because I didn't do anything wrong to quit. Finally, June 25th rolls around. I get a text message from Jack. Hey, I've set up a meeting for us tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Please acknowledge it in the calendar. So I get the calendar invite, say I'll be there. June 26th, 10 o'clock comes, I hop on this call. And Jack proceeds to say, Paul is on the call again, and Jack proceeds to start lying. As we talked about, you committed some fraud on paperwork. Whoa, wait, what? We ain't never talked about no fraud on paperwork, and what fraud did I commit on any paperwork? And I said, Paul was sitting taking all these notes. So where in his notes did they say we talked about fraud? Because he knows, like I do, that never came up. So where the heck is that coming from? Jack froze. Because I guess he thinks I'm that stupid. I already told him, you're not dealing with the stupid and dumb individual. I know my rights. I know we talked about. I took notes too. I know what was said. Now, the only thing he can be talking about fraud was not even really in the handbook, which is my calendar was out of sync that day because I was updating it until he targeted me and he found me at the store and I stopped updating it. If that's fraud, sue me. That was never talked about. Well. The other things that we talked about, we've decided to go ahead and terminate you. You'll be getting can I get an email address to send this over to your email so you can see this? Because as of today, we've cut all access, so you have nothing. I'm like, that ain't shocking because you guys want to make sure. I said all the things I needed to get except for one piece that I forgot to grab, but I have text messages for, I already got. And that was because he had a person on his team that's LGBTQ, afraid for their life. Jack refused to move this person, and you better believe I told this to my attorneys. That's putting somebody in a protected class in danger. I have text messages to prove it. The email I forgot to grab, but the email says the same thing as the text message because the whole email that was written is in the text message. Person crying for their life, for afraid they've almost got attacked once. Can we please switch territories? Jack said, think person can handle it. That person has a lawsuit too. I suggest they dig into that because that is blatantly disregard of somebody coming to you as a manager saying, I feel that because of who or what I am, my life is at danger. Jack didn't move. So he sends me this stuff to my email. I said, Jack, what I'm fired for? Well, you know, the stuff that we talked. No. What exactly am I fired for? He can never tell me. Let me read you just the parts of my termination letter that matters, because the rest of it just goes into basically if I felt like that it wasn't made in context of the Apple policy, who to contact. Here's what my termination letter says. And I want you guys to tell me if you can tell me why I was fired. On May 22nd, 2025, Apple became concerned that you may have engaged and inappropriate workplace behavior, including but not limited to violating Apple policies, and you were suspended with full pay and benefits while Apple conducted an investigation. Based on all the information reviewed, Apple has determined that you engaged in conduct that warrants termination of employment, including but not limited to violation of Apple's business conduct policy. Therefore, your employment with Apple will be terminated effective July 3rd, 2025. Can anybody tell me why I was fired? Now, before people get all hyped about they don't got to tell you, let me just kind of give you a little bit what the law says. Yes, California is an at will state. You got it. But because of lawsuits, if you're firing somebody for just cause, you have to tell them that. And because of unemployment, who ask you, why were you fired? And if any of these entities were to contact Apple, Apple would have to tell them exactly why I was fired, and it has to correspond with the termination letter. Again, why was I fired? So if the reason is that I engaged in inappropriate workplace behavior, including but not limited to violating Apple policies, what was the behavior that was inappropriate? That could be a number of things. I could have been cussing out a customer. I could have smacked somebody. I could have threatened somebody. I could have inappropriately touched somebody. I mean, do you see where inappropriate workplace behavior goes? What policy did I violate? He asked me if I had anything else to say. And I said, yes, I'll be suing Apple. I said, as soon as I hang up this call, I'm calling my attorneys and I'm going to sue you. Oh, Jack got all hyped. Oh, well, whatever, do what you got to do. But if you think that I made an error or that my decision was not right, in that email, it tells you who you can call and they can look into it. Now, I think I was being professional because I said to him, I said, why would I do that? Here's what I really wanted to say. Why the fuck would I want to go do that? The same people that allow you to make up this trumped up letter is the same people that's going to back you up because they're not going to admit that you did anything wrong because they are there to protect you. Hung up the phone, immediately called my attorneys. Now, here's how you do it if you want to wage a lawsuit. You want to know if you have a lawsuit worth waging. You don't go to your attorney that you have to pay money to because they're going to tell you, you got a lawsuit, even if you don't, so they can get that $5,000, $1,000, $2,000 retainer and that whatever that fee is between $100 to $500 an hour, they're going to charge you just to do all the stuff, just come and say you don't got no suit. So, and learning in my time of interviewing lawyers, I interviewed one of the top lawyers here in LA. He was a trial lawyer first, and now he's one of the biggest injury lawyers here, Naeem Aramani. He gave me an idea. He goes, always call one of us first. Now, I can't call him because of a personal injury. If you go to an attorney that is, we get paid when you do, they're going to tell you if you got a case or not because their payment relies on you having a case. So they're not going to lie to you. They're not going to waste your time. They're not going to say you got a case if you don't because they're not collecting any money. So I went to one of those lawyers. When I told the lawyers my whole entire spiel, the first thing they said is, you got a case. Now, here's what I know about these kind of lawyers, when you file discrimination. Dude, they go for everything. They wanted to know, did Apple pay you correctly? When was your last paycheck? I did question because there's a rule and a law that says if somebody fires you, that you have the right to ask for your check within 1 day and they got to produce it. Most time people come to firing you with the check. But I forgot to tell you, I wasn't fired in person. I was fired over WebEx and email, which becomes another point of contention. But my lawyer, she says, well, we won't push that because it's July 3rd. They're probably doing that because they got to get together, any unused vacation time and all that other time you may have. So we will allow that. I said, all right, I'll follow your lead. We'll allow that. That's cool. That's fine. But then what I find out is, dude, they go for the juggler. So my lawyer would start asking things like, did you feel like it was racial discrimination? Now, I didn't even bring racial discrimination up to her. She goes, what do you want to sue for? I said, I want to sue for being targeted and for discrimination. just plain discrimination. And I gave her those examples why. I was the only one that was being followed. I was the only one that was being tracked. I was the only one that was made to follow certain rules. Oh, and by the way, what I did mention is the other reason why people knew that I was being tracked is because on May 22nd, Jack did not mention that he was going anywhere near me or anybody else. And I got a text message from somebody that said, hey, we saw that Jack visited you today. What is he looking for? Nobody knew Jack saw me anywhere. But anyway, I said, well, now that I think about it, there's one statement that he made that could have been a racially charged situation. I'm not really sure, but yeah. She goes, oh, well, how many black people works in your company? I'm saying these are real questions the Lord's asking me. And like, I don't know about the company, I said, but I can only answer to, I guess, what my region is and what I've seen around me. She goes, okay, how many black people is in your direct region that you work up under Jack? One, me. Has there ever been any other ones? Yeah. There's been a guy who is African descent. He's no longer with the company. He quit. There was a girl that was working for us that was part-time, but she ended up quitting. I said, so for the better part of this whole team, I've been the only black person that's here. Do you know any other black person that is on your team or surrounding teams in your same type of regional geographical area? One. And he's on another team. Then they said, well, do you know of any black managers, regional managers? Now, these are things I got to sit here and think about, right? Because I'm sitting here going, dude, I've never really thought about these kind of things before because I don't really let race cause into my mind of what's going on. So I had to think. And I'm like, oh, recently I was just with everybody that's a part of this program from about every parts of the states that it touches. And I said, I only saw one regional manager that was black. I said, now there could be more. I said, but that day I was there for October, for a few days I was there, I've only seen one other one. She said, well, based on that, and based on the things he's making you do on your own, we're also filing for racial discrimination. So my lawsuit against Apple was for targeting, discrimination, and racial discrimination. And I was like, okay, so she goes, this is the suit. She sent me the retainer. Here's the retainer right here. Boom. We don't get paid till you do. We're going to go. Let me tell you how Apple gets out of these things. So Apple decided not to cooperate with the lawsuit. Now, when you hire attorneys like this, they're only going to go so far. That's because of the fact that they only get paid when you do. And even if you do have a case, they can't sit around for the next 1 or 2 years to hash that out. So basically, they wrote me back and they said, Apple, and I filed this the day of, right? So I filed this that date. And so they wrote back and they said, well, Apple is not either cooperating with us or they refuse to give a settlement. They said, you do have a case, but we're not going to be able to continue the case on with you. Therefore, we do advise you to go seek for other attorneys, so on and so forth. And they reminded me that I have so many days and months to do so before I would never, ever be able to go after Apple for any type of compensation. Let me tell you why I sit with that here in closing. Now, I think you guys are bearing me this long, but a lot of the information I gave you is relevant because I have to give you the beginning so you see where this end is. I don't know what I'm going to do. I never filed a lawsuit for money because, for one, for everything that I felt was done to me at this point and the pay that they give, which is dismal. And that's one thing I forgot to point out to you. I worked there for 8 years and I did not clear $30 an hour. Apple is a joke because they don't want to give their people new equipment at all. And this is why Apple's representatives looked at it as jokes because they come from a very rich company that makes their own devices. Okay, so it's easier for them to give us devices because they make their own. Samsung doesn't make all of their own devices. They may make the phone, but they don't make the technology, none of that. Their people's working on 2-year-old phones. When I was there with Apple, iPhone 15, they give you a MacBook once every 3 years. But when you go into Samsung and Google and all those guys, they got the newest phone that just dropped and that just came out. This is why Apple will always be a joke. But I didn't clear $30 an hour. I think I left at $27 and somewhere 60, 70 cents an hour after 8 years. This is after multiple adjustments, after multiple raises, after multiple reviews. I still didn't clear $30 an hour. My counterparts were for Samsung and Google doing the same job, was making 6 figures. One says, if I'm not making 6 figures, The people below me is making no less than $40 an hour. Apple's still sitting on $27 an hour for me after 8 years. So if you think people values that job at that, no, they don't. There's people that's now turned down the position because Apple won't start any higher than $25 an hour. Okay, so when you're coming into this job new, they're only offering you $25 an hour. They're also telling you that there is no room for growth. So they're saying that the program where it is now is internally locked. And there's never, if you're an S2, which was a part-time specialist, you're stuck there. You would never go to S3. You would never go to S4. That S3 and S4 was programs that was made to retain ASCs and LASCs. That's all the reason they did it. So everybody that comes in, regardless of your skill level, where you will always become an S2 with no room to move up. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I would sue for more than $50,000 at this point. The lawsuit was never about money. It was about principle. Apple's been touched by that now because they all, and I'm sure Jack was aware that I did indeed file a lawsuit. I'm talking to my wife now to see if I want to pursue this, but I may. So Apple's not out of the woods yet. I still may refile the lawsuit. This time I will retain an attorney because I know that there is in fact a case, and I will hold Apple in a lawsuit as long as I have to get justice for me and other people that's been put through this. But maybe as we go on the line, I will keep you guys updated in what I decide to do about that. Finally, I will say this publicly when it comes to Jesse and it comes to Kyle and it comes to Jose, I'm going to just tell them thank you. Each one of them has been very instrumental in my journey here at Apple. I would not have been here without Nelson. Nelson was the one that got me in the door, and he's been the one that has always been in my corner as well. Without Nelson, I wouldn't be here. Nelson came with the bench. There's like, I think 4 or 5 of us. I think 2 of us remain with the company now from the people that he's recommended to be hired. So to those people, thank you. I have no malice against you in any way, shape, or form. To the team, I know that this is probably, if people's listening, because, a link will be sent to this to the higher ups, maybe they're going to fix some things that need to be fixed. And if it causes life to be harder for those that work for Apple, I apologize. But I already told Jack when he messed with me, I was the wrong one. Here you go. I'm not going to hold anything back. I want to let everybody know what's going on. To Jack, I hope you got what you wanted. This whole decision was in your court. You could decide to do whatever you wanted to, but you decided to be discriminatory and to fire me unjustly. If I do continue to go forward with this lawsuit, I don't know what actually happens to the person that causes the lawsuit, but I hope you get everything you have coming to you. You maybe need to go back and take some managing courses, because I won't let you know flat out from the people I've talked to, everybody don't think that you just awesome guy. A lot of people feel that you are a great person to maybe hang out with personally, but for lack of a better term, you are a prick when it comes to being a manager, which I do know that you like to rule people by intimidation and fear. I'm a man just like you, not that much older than you or younger than you. You're older than me. We stay the same age for 2 months' time. So you're going to treat me like a man that has been through more things than you probably have been in your life and been through more trials, tribulations, and everything else. But people say, you can't say it because he's your boss. Yes, I can, because at the end of the day, everybody is just a human being and they are just a man. You have broken nothing. I have dealt with people a lot harsher than you. So if you think you broke me or my family's out on the street or we're going hungry and that was what you wanted to do, didn't happen. Further, I would say get in touch with the world. You all will remember the whole meeting when it came down to why there was low numbers in certain areas of LA, when it's brought to your attention because Trump was conducting what his stupid behind said he was going to do. And in that ICE raids, your question was, is that really happening? You need to be in touch with the world because it shows you just don't care. All right, guys, that does it for this one. I hope that you take everything in mind that I said. Do not let these corporations get away with things like this. If you have a platform like I do, air it. Regardless of what anybody seems to think, air that, because the fact that it is your story to tell, and you need to make people aware of what these companies are doing so that other people don't fall into the same trap. All right, guys, once again, I thank you for joining me for this episode. I know you have many choices in True Crime and Interview Podcast. I'm grateful that I am one of your choices, and you have been listening to the only three-faceted podcast of its kind. Please be good to yourself and each other, and always remember, always stay humble. An act of kindness can make someone's day. A little love and compassion can go a long way. And remember that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. I'll catch you guys on the next one.
Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. One link to the link tree has it all. Feel free to drop us a line at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Arslan. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild and David McClam. Theme music, Legendary, by New Alchemist. Introduction and ending credits by Jackie Voice. See you next time on True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People.